Welcome and thank you for attendance today at Committee Day of the August 2023 meeting of the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission. Please join us for the invocation and pledge. Commissioner Butt will lead us. Please stand.
Our God, Father in heaven, we thank Thee for the privilege of life this day, for the opportunity that as we gather to recognize Thee as Almighty God, to recognize Thy name above every name upon this earth. Father, we're thankful for the creation that You willed into being through Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Father, we, as an agency, respect and understand the responsibility that we have to oversee and protect the wildlife. And Father, we especially pray Thy blessings upon all who are gathered here this day, that You would protect them as they travel, going and coming. Father, we would pray for all those who have family and friends who are in need of our prayers because of sickness or accidents or whatever. Father, we would continue to ask Thy blessings upon this gathering, that we'll make wise decisions as we contemplate the things need to be done for this state. Father, it's all this we ask and pray through Thy Holy Son, Jesus Christ, and amen. Let's pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Butt. Okay, our visitors today, we have a long list. Patsy Cornelius with Commercial Fishermen, and Clay Young with American Caviar. Of course, Clarence and Laura Dye with TFWC. Michael and Crystal Frazier. Nick and Drew Wira. Emily Hoyle, and all three of those are with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services. Mike Kelly, Commercial Fisherman. Ron Shank, Kelvin Young, Damian Simbach, and they're with the TVA. William Nolan, Roger Jenkins, Vance Dennis, Crystal Young, and Bill Wigington. Thank each and every one of y'all for coming. Welcome. We had a good crowd. We had to set out more chairs, actually. Okay. Miss Mary, will you call the roll?
Chris Devaney.
Here.
Jimmy Granberry.
Here.
Monty Blue.
Here.
Stan Butt.
Here.
Wally Childress.
Here.
Bill Cox.
Here.
Chip Saltzman. Hank Wright.
Here.
Brad Box.
Here.
Rhonda Moody. Here. Kent Woods.
Here.
Greg Davenport.
Here.
Tommy Woods.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Miss Mary. Executive Director Maxedon. Your reports?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Put that thing away just a little bit. Well, good afternoon, members of the commission, and thank you all the visitors and guests that are here today. We got a full agenda before us today and tomorrow, including a preview of the 23-24 fishing regulations and rules for consideration. We'll hear those tomorrow. We also have some fun agenda items, including the presentation of the conservation raffle winners. We'll get to hear that first thing tomorrow, and also recognition of our boating officer of the year. We also want to remind everyone that Free Hunting Day is going to be this Saturday. This is an opportunity for anyone to get out and give hunting a try without needing a license. So we hope to see a lot of folks outdoors Saturday getting to use this event. It also coincides with the opening of squirrel season, which is a perfect time for hunters to take out youth or a beginning hunter to introduce them to the sport. And at TWRA, one of our top priorities is ensuring hunting opportunities for generations to come by conserving public land and wildlife populations. But we also need hunters to do their part by passing down the skills that they've learned to to their friends and family. So hopefully everybody will take the opportunity to carry a new person outdoors on Saturday. As you know, TWA is primarily funded, or I hope most of you know that TWA is primarily funded by the sales of hunting and fishing licenses and federal excise taxes on sporting goods, which comes to us in the form of federal grants. Less than 1% of our operational budget comes from the state's general fund from tax dollars. So anytime you hear somebody saying your tax dollars are at work for you, they're not for the wildlife agency, at least here in Tennessee. The folks of you in this room, they're buying hunting and fishing license, you're funding all the conservation work that we do, and you're putting habitat on the ground for hunters and fishermen to use. That's important to keep in mind, since this meeting is also going to include the commission's approval of our 24-25 budget. Our staff have put a lot of hours into preparation of the budget. I see our budget analyst here, William. Welcome you today. I'm glad to see him in the room. This year's been a challenge for us as an agency. We're trying to keep a pretty tight budget, so I'm thankful for the staff, all the time that they've put into really preparing the budget and trying to keep a pretty tight budget. Like most organizations and companies, we felt the pressure of inflation and high input costs that have affected all of our management work. But despite those challenges, our staff have continued to deploy resources, great programs and things for the sportsmen that protect and manage our natural resources for the benefit of all of our hunters and anglers. Mr. Chairman, you know that I typically try to show something kind of special at each commission meeting, usually one of our youth that have caught a fish. We got something a little different today, something that's very special. This morning, there was a fishing trip. I think the chairman will probably thank some folks here in a minute, but there was a special trip put together. The chairman was actually welcomed with a little bit of a special fishing rod. Chairman, I think you may have that behind you. Looks like sitting there today. I think a challenge have been put out to him this morning by a special young lady. We've got one of our bass anglers, high school bass anglers, that's very competitive, that several of the commissioners know, Miss Laney Holbert, and she's very competitive. So I think she issued a challenge. So Scott, at this time, let's see how that challenge mail worked out this morning.
You don't have one on a Barbie pole.
I think I do.
No, you don't.
Do you really?
You gonna go around the boat on
Really
it.
get around the motor.
Look right there.
Look at there. Yeah.
Look at your hair. The old Barbie pole comes through.
Yeah.
Come here. Yes.
Thank you, Laney.
Look at that. Look
Thank
at
you, Laney. Good job.
What a fish.
Look at there. Don't shake your head. Popped right top of the head. Laney, I'm gonna get it back from us and use this weekend. That's what you catch.
So Laney, if you're watching, I think there's been a challenge. Chairman may pass that back to you for the weekend. We're going to see what you can do with that pole. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director. It was an eventful morning. I tried conventional tackle for a while, and I had to break out the Barbie pole, and it come through for me, sure enough. So it was a great morning, and we want to thank, I'm not certain any of the boat captains are in here, but if they are, what a great morning. They got out of bed really early, and they showed up here, and they so graciously took us fishing. And we actually caught fish in this hot, hard weather to fish in. We had a really good morning, and we want to thank them. We really do. Yeah, bless your heart. Okay, before we have Director Maxedon introduce our first presenter, are there any announcements by commission members? Anyone got anything? Any of the public? Okay, Director Maxedon, will you introduce Mr. Hoyle with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services for his presentation?
Yes, sir. So we're blessed to have some truly incredible partner agencies, and you heard some of those introduced by the chairman just a minute ago, and they all support the management work that we do here at the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Today, we have two of those that are going to join us for presentations. First up is going to be Mr. Emery Hoyle. Emery is the Refuge Supervisor for Area 3 of the Southeast region. His responsibilities overseeing refuges in Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, North and South Carolina. Emery started his career with the Fish and Wildlife Service 30 years ago at the Tennessee National Wildlife Refuge. He actually told me a little while ago about all the places he lived. I think the last one was actually in Camden. So he's a West Tennessee guy in our mind. So today, Emery's going to be here to give us an update on the Paint Rock River National Wildlife Refuge. Before we welcome Emery, I'd like to recognize two people that came with him. Where is Nick and Drew Warwa in the back? If you guys will raise your hands. So Nick and Drew Warwa actually both obviously have wildlife backgrounds, but their dad is a retired employee from the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, Mr. Carl Warwa. Carl was actually a mentor of mine. I know he's mentored Patrick Lemons and probably some other guys in the room, but he was one of our guys that was on the forefront of really doing wetlands management in the state of Tennessee, and he's passed that tradition on to his boys. So welcome along with Emery, guys. Mr. Emery, if you'll come up, love to have you at this time.
Got us up here. Well, thank you all for having me. It's almost like a homecoming coming back here, seeing all these TWRA folks. And it's been so great to meet a lot of the new folks that I haven't met before. And it's been great to see some old friends that I haven't seen in a long, long time. As Jason said, I started my career here in with the Fish and Wildlife Service in the conservation world. And I can't think of a better place to have started that career. I'm introduced to just a very, very rich resource that you guys provide up here for the public. I always told all my friends and family back home that I have moved to paradise, sportsman's paradise. I mean, living in Benton County back in those days, back then, I think I counted one time, and I think there were like 8 wildlife management areas within, maybe just in Benton County. Certainly it would have been Benton and Henry County. But coming from the area of Alabama that I grew up in, we didn't have that much hunting opportunity so close. So thank you all so much for what you do, what you have been doing for at least the past 30 years. The Fish and Wildlife Service has enjoyed a great working relationship with TWRA. It's really served as a model with how the Fish and Wildlife Service should be working with our state agency partners. And our relationships with our state agency partners is, paramount, important that we walk shoulder to shoulder because we share the same commitment to, provide outdoor recreational opportunities to our constituency, which is our public, the taxpayers. So thank you all for what you do. I appreciate you having me. The reason I wanted to come here today was to give you all an update on our newest National Wildlife Refuge, Paint Rock River National Wildlife Refuge, which is going to be located just outside of Winchester, Tennessee, in the headwaters of the Paint Rock River. We actually entered into the planning phase for this. This is a little unique in that generally when we finish the planning phase and we get authorization to establish a refuge, it generally does not take nearly as much time to actually land and get started and actually establish the refuge on the ground. But for a variety of reasons, this project has taken some time, but we're excited to say that we are now ready to establish the Paint Rock River National Wildlife Refuge. And since so much time has gone by, we wanted to make sure and bring everybody up to speed because, like I said, our relationships with our state partners, the public, local communities, it's very important to us. So we want to make sure that nobody's surprised. Want to give a little bit of background on where we came to get here and, a little bit on moving forward, what we plan on moving forward. This picture here is actually taken from the bluff right next to the parking lot at Bear Hollow Mountain, looking out across the headwaters of the Paint Rock River. So the Paint Rock River region, it's recognized as one of the most biologically diverse and critically imperiled temperate zones in the world. It's considered a global center for both freshwater, aquatic, and subterranean fauna. The watershed contains habitat for 16 federally listed species and numerous species of concern. It's home to some of the most biologically significant resources in the U.S. The Conservation Partnership area is 90% forested and supports 4 listed and 1 candidate species. And I'll talk a little bit more about the Conservation Partnership area in a minute, but that is the 40,000 acre unit where we are focusing our efforts within that headwaters region there. So as part of the Appalachian Landscape Conservation Cooperative, this refuge will contribute to a more connected and functional landscape by providing habitat connections between existing conservation areas, which is very important to us for wildlife movement and just increasing, trying to pinpoint conservation efforts where they can, where we can synergize with partners like the state, and Bear Hollow Mountain as well as the Skyline WMA are located right adjacent to this area. We also want to protect and manage large tracts of contiguous hardwood forest. So we believe that establishing the Paint Rock River National Wildlife Refuge contributes to the achievement of the greater conservation community's missions, goals, and objectives. So, where do I need to point this? Got it. Okay. So our conservation goals are to achieve a resilient, sustainable, socio-ecological landscape by bringing stakeholders together to prioritize and coordinate actions on the ground. Conservation in this Paint Rock Valley area goes back decades. And as I recall, as a young co-op student right out of college, John Taylor, the manager at Tennessee, was involved in, early discussions where state agencies, non-governmental organizations, folks like the Nature Conservancy, trying to figure out the best way to protect. Okay. So this watershed planning partnership has been supported by over 15 agencies and organizations and many individuals. The major partners in this effort included TWRA, TDEC, the Nature Conservancy, the Land Trust for Tennessee, Open Space Institute, and of course the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. While recognizing the great support of partners, it's worth mentioning, the limited amount of detractors that we spoke with in that community. And it's generally been very low, but there was, obviously some concerns that a federal agency coming in would restrict the recreational opportunities that have been occurring out there, for years, off-road vehicle riders and that sort of thing. But predominantly, I just like to stress that, predominantly support for this acquisition project was very high. And I will say that we started this process in 2012, and we did quite a bit of outreach in 2012 and 2013. We had several open houses in Franklin County. I think one at the Franklin County Library there in Winchester, one at the high school there. Had a public meeting at the National Guard Armory. Probably about 150 people were in attendance. And like I said, referring back to the high school meeting, we had probably 80 to 100 people were in attendance there. Several congressional hearings, as you can see there. A lot of direct mailings, public scoping period, and several opportunities for the public and partners to comment on the draft land protection plan and environmental assessment. So a little bit more about the actual refuge itself and the resources there. As you can see there, there's a map of the Paint Rock River and the whole watershed. Incredible aquatic biodiversity, intact tracts of hardwood forest were and continue to be the driving force in landscape conservation attention. So the watershed's 294,000 acres. Originates in Franklin County, Tennessee, and flows southward through Jackson, Madison, and Marshall counties in Alabama to the Tennessee River. Again, the Appalachian mixed mesophytic forest ecoregion is widely recognized as one of the most biologically diverse and critically imperiled temperate zones in the world, according to the World Wildlife Federation. And it's considered in subterranean fauna. Well, one of the things we, in addition to conservation of resources, one of the things that really drives us is providing recreational opportunities in the form of a variety of wildlife-dependent activities that include hunting, fishing, wildlife observation and photography, environmental education, and interpretation. As I said before, our local communities and our constituency, the American public is very important to us. And anything we do, even though it may have great conservation benefits, we want to strive to remain relevant within our communities. And providing recreational opportunities is, at the top of that list for remaining relevant. So currently authorized, where is the refuge? As you can see there, that's the map of Franklin County, the Conservation Partnership Area. 40,500 acres, located from the Tennessee line flowing northward, encompassing the headwaters of the Paint Rock, which is Estill Fork, Larkin Fork, and Hurricane Creek. We have been authorized to acquire interest in up to 25,120 acres in that conservation partnership area. And that interest can be acquired through buying land, fee title acquisition, or entering into conservation. And I cannot stress enough for everybody that it is our policy to only work with willing landowners. Our policy is not to pursue lands through condemnation. That's always a concern with private folks when the federal government comes in and establishes refuges, national parks, national forest. It's the Fish and Wildlife Service's policy to only work with willing landowners, whether through the purchase of their property or through entering into conservation easements with those folks. So our major goals are that the refuge will protect and restore habitat for T&E and threatened and endangered and candidate species, protect and maintain habitat for a diversity of fish, wildlife, and plants, including state-listed species, protect some of the last remaining large tracts of eastern deciduous forest, provide habitats for migratory birds, including neotropical migratory birds and other species of concern, and provide opportunities for a variety of wildlife-dependent recreation. Those recreational activities that I mentioned to you guys earlier: hunting, fishing, wildlife observation, photography, interpretation, and environmental education. That's just a larger view of the conservation partnership area and the existing Bear Hollow Mountain state lands. So one of the objectives, let me go to the next slide. See there. One of the objectives of the establishment of the refuge is a more connected and functional conservation landscape that will provide effective habitat connect existing conservation lands and future conservation lands. Thing to note, we strongly support the acquisition of identified land parcels. These are our high, medium, and low priority parcels that were developed based on a model that took into account numerous factors of some biologically important parameters. And so that's where we came up with the 25,120 acres of lands that we were looking to acquire. But the important thing to note is that we strongly support the acquisition of identified land parcels in the conservation partnership area by other agencies, organizations, or individuals in their efforts to develop connections between existing or future conservation areas. So we are just want everybody to realize that, we're in this to be a partner. We're not in this to try to gobble up land. If the state will do everything we can to support the state, our non-governmental organizational partners like the Nature Conservancy and other folks, to come in and help conserve this area. This may be a little bit boring, but to explain a little bit about how we prioritized parcels, we basically ranked the parcels at the sub-watershed level in those three headwater creeks, which are Estill Fork, Larkin Fork, and Hurricane Creek. We took into account things like distance, river frontage, distance to the river, percent forest cover, proximity to state lands, and overall size. So anyway, that's how we identified lands. What I do. I'm trying to go backwards. Some priority resources of conservation concern. There are 5 listed species are known from the CPA, and those are, several mussels, several species of bats, and one species of plant, the white fringeless orchid. The CPA and the area immediately downstream are particularly critical to the conservation of the lamp mussel and the pale lilliput, both imperiled mollusks. Like I said, I'm going to try to go through this biological details here that some folks might enjoy, others might find a little slow, but I'll just summarize and say that there are aquatic species that occur there that traditionally had a much wider range that now occur nowhere else but in that conservation partnership area. And our focus is to conserve water quality in those headwaters, which will then protect the water quality downstream. So if we zoom into the CPA, we can see its importance to the landscape conservation design. Priority land bird species identified in the Appalachian Mountains Joint Venture Implementation Plan. And up here, you can see that this area provides habitat for 234 different bird species, which are in decline. 80% of the population, which is a very it's an important bird in that it's also in decline, but it's also actually an indicator species where you have cerulean warblers. You have also rich avian biodiversity in an area. So, we like to see a lot of cerulean warblers in forested habitat. 70% of priority land birds are found in that conservation partnership area. So forest management in Southern Tennessee, 14%. Got that there. Thank you. 14% of the native forest cover has been lost since 1981. 74% of which resulted from hardwood to pine conversion. And though 90% of the CPA is forested, 40% is managed for timber production. It really creates suboptimal habitat for mid-story and understory breeding birds. Obviously, threats are habitat fragmentation, urban development, aquatic migration barriers such as low water crossings, instead of bridges, invasive species, and climate change. That got it. Area in yellow right there, it's the forest cover loss since 2000 in that watershed, which is really pretty good relatively. Large tracts have been subdivided in that area. If you go back into the early 90s and even before that, there were like 3 major landowners in that area. I mean, that owned the majority of that. Many of those tracts have been subdivided, and many of those subdivided tracts, as you can see there, 1997, that 2000 middle photo there, and in 2020 tracts now comprise that original tract in 1997. And the blue on the right there, that indicates the I think that's the land that you guys just purchased, the Winchester part that you added to Bear Hollow Mountain. So good. And that's just a map right there to summarize this slide. Another thing is that these areas in dark green have significant biodiversity and high resiliency to of climate change. And that was highlighted in a report by the Nature Conservancy several years back. So resiliency and basic oasis also are important reasons for acquiring lands in this area, conserving this area. So that's why we targeted this area, gave you a little bit of the history about how we got to this point. 2012 and 2013, a lot of planning and a lot of outreach. It was authorized by our Washington office, by the acting director in 2016. And here we are now in 2023. We're looking at the first parcel to be included in the refuge. And it's actually going to be, that's it right there. So it is an 87-acre parcel. You can see it right in the middle. It's kind of highlighted. It's right next to the new, the most recent, one of the most recent tracks that Bear Hollow Mountain has acquired, Kings Mountain Road. And we're excited to be able to work with TWRA to partner wherever it makes sense, either through, providing enhanced access to y'all's property or whatever we can do. And I just would like to say too, is it's our policy through our hunt fish program, try to, as much as is possible, with respect to policy and regulations that we have to go by, we try to mirror the hunting opportunities that the adjacent WMAs provide, so that we can try to be as seamless as possible. It cuts down on confusion with local hunters having two different sets of rules and regulations that they have to abide by. So, we look forward to sitting down with you guys and looking at rules and regs and trying to see where we can adopt those things and move forward as seamlessly as possible. So moving forward, obviously, the more land up there that we acquire, the more presence that we will have to have. How do we acquire land? Again, stressing we only work with interested landowners. From the standpoint of purchasing additional property, we rely on Land and Water Conservation Fund. And then we actually have a pot of money called Recreational Access Funding, where we are able to submit proposals for that funding that fall under the umbrella of increasing recreational access for the public. Migratory Bird Conservation Fund is also another funding source that we use to acquire properties. And that is my presentation. And I don't know if any of you guys have any questions. I would be happy to answer those. This Paint Rock National Wildlife Refuge will be administered. Day-to-day administration will be out of the Wheeler National Wildlife Refuge office in Decatur, Alabama. So if you have any questions at all about the refuge, you need a contact, you have a landowner or individuals who might be interested in learning more, you can direct them there. Have them talk to any of the managers there, Drew or Nick Werwa, Ricky, Emery, Hoyle. I'm the refuge supervisor over that area. I'd be glad to answer any questions, talk to anyone.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyle. Is there any questions from the commission? Anyone have any questions on this presentation? Comments? Director Maxedon, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, sir. Thank you all again for having me. And again, thank you all for what you do.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Emery. Maybe one of the things to point out that means to us, that would be 25,000 additional acres of that footprint if everything got acquired. So I know a lot of folks in here, it's great to protect a lot of these listed species. That's one of the greatest things it'll do, but also provide good huntable land. So 25,000 additional huntable acres if everything was acquired in that footprint. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move right on to the next one if it's okay with you. So also joining us today is Kelvin Young. Kelvin is the watershed representative with Tennessee Valley Authority. Kelvin spent 6 years working out of the Paris, Tennessee watershed office on Kentucky Lake and currently lead for Kentucky and Wheeler reservoirs. So today he's going to 4 dewatering areas. So welcome, Kelvin. Come on up.
Okay, yeah, my history is a little bit similar to Emery's. I started with TVA 2012 in the Paris office. Worked there for about 6 years. I was actually the young chap when I got there, and since then we've had some turnover with you guys, our partners TWRA. I worked with Ronnie Cole and Dan Fuqua, Jim Hamilton, I think was the regional manager, if I got that right. And David Aldrich. So we got some new faces now. They've already seen this presentation presented to them back in the spring. Patrick and Brad, just want to say thank you guys. We couldn't do anything without their help. So just a little bit more about me. I actually graduated from Alabama A&M University in forestry. Prior to TVA, prior to TVA and 100 pounds ago, I was a wildland firefighter for the U.S. Forest Service. Spent most of my time out in the Pacific Northwest in Oregon and Washington area, and came to TVA in 2012. So we were asked to present information on the upcoming dewatering pump house project, but it's kind of hard to do that without telling a little bit of our history. So we'll just walk through this pretty quickly. So for those who don't know, TVA, has 9, better look at this, projects on Kentucky, between Kentucky and Wheeler Reservoir. The map showing where they are, Kentucky Wheeler. That little circle above Chattanooga is it's a little small dam that we manage on the Houston River or creek. Why were these dewatering units constructed? Well, they were constructed for mosquito control. Back in the day, spent a lot of money mosquitoes. Prior to building the reservoir, they actually found these areas and identified them as flooded areas in those areas. Just a little bit of our management backstory. So from the 90s to the 2000s, that's FM is facilities management for TVA, was the asset on all dewatering units and backwater protection levees. The backwater protection levees are areas that protect, or levees, like Gunnersville has a levee that protects the city from flooding, and Big Sandy has the Sugar Creek levee that protects it from Kentucky Reservoir. Between that time period and 2000, up to 2011, we'll say, FM and Natural Resources, in my research, disputed through several correspondence and emails over ownership and budget, and just say over a 20-year period or more, and due to limited funding, the units and the pump houses got severely deteriorated over time. In 2012, was, our senior vice president told our senior manager, "Hey, you're going to take over all the dewatering assets and have the responsibility over them." And this is 2012 was when I started at the Paris office there, and it's kind of when we began really putting money into these levees and pump houses. This is just the Kentucky scope area. At the top there, we have West Sandy. I was going to read the acreage, but West Sandy, which is managed by you all, TWRA, along with Big Sandy and Camden. At the bottom, managed by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In addition, we have the 2 units on Wheeler, Harris Sweetwater Levee, and Whiteside, managed by State of Alabama, and jointly with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And the House levee is managed solely by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In addition, these are 2 areas that are not in operation anymore. Perryville Levee and Pump House. Pump House was demolished 2011, 2010 timeframe, and let me rephrase. 2011. While we manage habitat and land management, we manage for habitat, which includes agricultural crops, natural plants, wetlands, bioland hardwoods, resident wildlife species, migratory birds, of course, waterfowl. And that community and economic benefits from tourism is underlined with emphasis in Benton, Henry, and Decatur counties. We put that in there to let our management know how important the recreation duck hunting is important to that area. And so we like to tell them anytime we get new management that comes in and them on these areas. Additionally, these areas are located on the Mississippi Flyway. These are our options that we currently use. We are in discussion on kind of adjusting those a little bit. They're dewatered between April and July, between 7 and 12 feet, 7 foot. So Dam Safety Governance is an internal organization. They're who we abide by for as natural resources. They are governed actually by FEMA. And so houses, we have to do inspections so that we can meet FEMA requirements. We can do that, none of that, without the help of TWRA, because of course several of these are located within the WMA. So just a little bit of our past and how we got here. These are some of our accomplishments, projects from 2016 to 2022. Of course, the pump houses were in really bad shape, and so we removed and repaired and reinstalled pumps, including repairing and balancing propellers, installed new flap gates in the pump houses, electrical upgrades, installed a mobile network. Our facilities manager now can turn on the pump with his cell phone. Prior to that, he used to have to get a phone call, wake up in the middle of the night if the unit was flooding, run down to the unit, turn on the motor, and so that was a big upgrade for us. In addition, we put new trash racks on West Sandy, Big Sandy, and Camden, and Whiteside. Add additional spillways at Camden. So Camden was a real big problem area. I was actually looking at some old photos of it. Anytime the reservoir would flood, there would be a lot of damage to the levee and the roads getting in and out of Camden. And so to eliminate that and reduce erosion, we added additional spillways. So now when it floods, there's no road damage going in and out of that unit. We started a stabilization project at Big Sandy in 2018, and we just finished that in addition to removing a old inoperable concrete spillway that wasn't really working. Let's see, go back too fast. The last one was we partnered with TWA to install a water control structure at the birdsong end of the levee. I guess there were some issues with getting water review on that, and I think DU did the project. Is that correct? These are just some before and after. That's what Big Sandy looked like when I got there. Very mature trees. Some of them 16 for a long time with nothing done to them. The spillway at West Sandy is before and after. Those are planer trees. They had overgrown on the spillway. The spillway wasn't operating as it should either. These are just some photos inside the pump house. Non-functioning dash pots. Those are just it's a lever, hydraulic lever they were using to raise and lower the flap gates. In such bad condition, they would actually have to walk out over that catwalk and pull that thing because it's heavy. And It was pretty dangerous to replace, and I think that's a screw system they have on it now. That's just showing at the bottom left a crack in the flap gate from it slamming shut over and over due to the non-functioning spots. This is just showing some of the spillway rehab we done at Camden, and planting new grasses. On the bottom there is the flap gate and the discharge pipeliner that we replaced at Camden. This before and after pictures of Big Sandy. Like I say, everything's in there was rusted. The areas have been rehabbed and repainted, pumps replaced and relined. More before and after pictures. This is the Big Sandy stabilization project we just finished. That's Camden, and you see Camden was pump station. Look, doors rusted, catwalk, was dangerous. So this has been our work plan over the past few years. Like I said, we completed the Big Sandy levee stabilization project. In addition, we had to repair 3 pumps at West Sandy Pump House. We started environmental review on repairing the sluice gate. Big Sandy, it has a ginormous hole in it. Yet to do, need to remove some debris and blockages in the old river run at Big Sandy. Currently got some cypress growing in the levee at Camden we need to take. And like I say, on the schedule, we're planning to remove the Perryville pump house. It's become unsafe over the years. We got locks on the doors, and just due to vandalism and people breaking the door down and messing with the water levels, they've actually damaged the sluice gate valve. It's now severed. And so we decided it was time to just go ahead and take that pump house out, just due to vandalism and safety concerns. So this is the sluice gate leak that we're currently working on at Big Sandy. That's the amount of water coming out when Kentucky Lake is at full pool. So we're dealing with a significant leak. We sent divers in to look at that gate and got some underwater footage to see what was actually damaged. And so the metal gate, and it actually slides down in a frame. And we believe, not believe, but we actually saw where there's a hole gouged out on the side of that frame where concrete's been removed. And that's where all the leakage is coming from. So we're in the process of trying to fix that right now. That's our main priority for this fiscal year. We've had some significant delays in trying to get that done. That's always going to happen, but we're waiting on one more permit that would allow us to alter the pump house drill. They built these concrete pump houses like Fort Knox, and I guess they had no intentions of working on them. We're talking 80 plus years old, depending on when it was built. And so the plan is to actually cut a slot in the concrete floor. We'll have divers down below and use a crane system to lift the old gate out and put a new gate in. So we're hoping to get that done, hopefully by the end of September. And we spent a lot of money on pump repair over the past few years, and we figured, we're spending all this money on fixing the pump and getting it repaired. Every time we would pull a pump, the cost would be in excess from anywhere from $80,000 to $130,000+. And so it was like, a pump can't be that much. So we figured that new pumps, a couple $100,000. And so we actually put in a proposal within TVA to receive some funds to start a replacement project at all the pump houses. So beginning in 2024, we're going to start at Big Sandy, replacing both pumps. West Sandy over the next 3 years, and Camden will be the last with 3 pumps. And so that's a total a project, a cost of $3.4 million over 5 years. That's all I got. Any questions for me?
Sounds good, Jim.
I know you like that.
Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Blue.
Monty, I'd just like to say, we really appreciate, I know Patrick and Brad work with them a lot more than I do a great job. Kelvin's always been there, and some of the guys with TVA, I know they've got a tough job, just like we do, working these dewatering areas, and they've kind of got contrasting goals, I guess, from planting food to bringing that economic boon to a community, to duck hunting, to fishing, to dewatering area. But Kelvin's always been there, and appreciate you. I didn't know a lot of this was going on. I knew some of it. I knew some stuff about the Big Sandy, and I knew you had some delays, and it's great for this update. So I appreciate it. This is good information. And I wish we could get a lot of this information out to our community through a Facebook page, through like what we talked about, because people don't realize what money TVA has invested in these dewatering areas. That's a lot of money that you all are spending on getting that money, the water in or the water out, so that we can do the things that we're trying to accomplish as well. So it's a big part on TVA. So thank you for the work. And I wish we could get that information out there, let people know how much money, how much work y'all are doing to accommodate folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blue. Any other commissioners have questions? Director Maxedon, any follow-up?
Yes, sir. Just real quick to kind of put it in context. Thank you, Kelvin. Great job. They're great partners. Commissioner Blue hit on it. That's $3.5 million for these dewatering units. Why is that important to us? That's how we manage these waterfowl units at Kentucky Lake Complex. If we can't get the water on or off, we can't get crops out there. And so it's critical. We lease that ground from TVA. Some people may or may not know that for the waterfowl hunting there, but this is the piece that matters if we can get the water on or off to get the crops planted. So it's a big deal. Thank you for the partnership. Appreciate you all being willing to invest that kind of money in these dewatering pumps. That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Director. At this time, I'll turn it over to Fisheries Committee Chairman Monty Blue.
This time I'd like to call Chief Thurman to the podium. He's got a presentation for us.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be here today to present to you. Thank you. That's much better, isn't it? Pleasure to be here today to present to you our fishing regulation preview for 2023. Kind of like started off by recognizing a couple of really good fish that were caught this year. July 22nd, young man Palmer Tipton caught a 4-pound cutthroat out of the Boone tailwater. And that's a nice fish, and that's a fairly young stocking program that we've got there, and it's cranking out some really nice fish. Also next to it was a blue cat, 122 ounces, I think. Micah Burkhart caught that fish on the Cumberland River, June 28th. And this beat a record set by the same a year back in 2022. We're getting closer. The world record's 143 pounds, and that's from Bugs Island in Virginia. These records kind of really highlight the quality of fishing here in the state. And, our agency, one of our primary goals is to provide high quality, sustainable fisheries. And that kind of rolls well into this presentation because, you're going to see proposals today that deal with both of those things, quality and sustainability. And looking forward to moving into that. Let's see. All right. A little bit about our process. Every year, this kind of gets kicked off in April. Sometimes it goes in late March, but typically it's April. We have a public comment period. We then in May meet with our fisheries staff from across the state and get together and talk about the comments we got. We talk about field work they've been doing, what they're hearing from the public out in each part of the state. And from there, we start working on regulation proposals and working through it through the division, really through multiple divisions, the law enforcement division, fisheries, to get to this point in September where we give you this preview. There will be another comment period, September and October. And then in October, we'll bring this back to you for a vote. One of the things I wanted to point out about public comment. Surveys over the years, our creel surveys, we had angler attitude questions to get a feel for what the public thought about our management, what they thought about their fishing experiences. And we've more broadly applied that to our angler surveys. And this year we'll have like a lot of information that'll plug into what the public thinks about our management and about the fishing. And I'm looking forward to that. And, we'll share that with you, and that'll be a part of our process in 2024 for sure. So the first set of proposals deal with some TWA fishing lakes in West Tennessee over in Region 1, Glen Springs, Lake Graham, Carroll, and Garrett Lake. On three of them, Glen Springs, Lake Graham, and Garrett, we're proposing to remove the crappie daily creel limit and the minimum length limit on crappie. It's not uncommon in small impoundments and ponds and lakes to have issues trying to manage crappie. You end up with a lot of small fish, and these regulations of the crappie fishing there. On Carroll and Garrett, we've got a largemouth bass change in largemouth bass regs, removing daily creel at Carroll, removing the daily creel and the minimum length limit at Garrett, and moving to a one fish over 18. So you can keep as many, put harvest pressure on the small to get harvest pressure on the smaller fish and improve the size structure in the fishery. Now on to some small lakes and ponds in Region 3. I grouped these together. Bridgestone Firestone is a wildlife management area that has a couple of ponds, about 14 acres in total of ponds, 2 ponds over in White County. Indian Boundary Lake is just short of 100 acres, U.S. Forest Service lake on the Cherokee National Forest in Monroe County. And Lake Kefauver is a lake owned by the city of Madisonville. On all these lakes, proposing this set of regulations. Indian Boundary and Lake Kefauver both have like a 2 fish on largemouth bass, 2 bass, over 14 inches. Bridgestone Firestone was a catch and release lake, and these lakes are pretty out of balance from a bass fishery standpoint. And we've had kind of a deer sunfish, and so we're pulling that creel number back. Most of those are at 20. And then a 5 fish per day catfish limit with no minimum length limit. Indian Boundary and Kefauver both have a size limit on their catfish. And then just like those crappie to try to keep pressure on those. One of the other changes, so this replaces all the regulations that are in the guide now and in Proclamation for these water bodies. Things that I want to point out about Bridgestone Firestone is that it had said, look, we're not getting a lot of use here. Parents couldn't fish with kids, and he requested that ponds and open it up to everybody with a license to come fish. This really fits in with our R3 goals for increasing opportunity for fishing, and it'll better utilize the lake, the ponds there at Bridgestone Firestone. We're going to head over to the Emery River. Next two proposals you'll see apply to the Emery River in Region 3. The Emery runs across the Cumberland Plateau through Morgan, Cumberland, and Roane counties. It's a tributary of the Clinch River and runs into Watts Bar Reservoir. You know, another thing about the Emery that's interesting is it borders Catoosa and is part of the National Scenic River Corridor, the OBID National Scenic River Corridor. Creeks like Daddy Creek and Clear Creek, which also are tied in with that watershed. All right. We've been stocking walleye in Watts Bar since 2011, and we've seen a great fishery develop there. With the numbers of fish that have built up, we've also seen walleye start using the river for a spawning run. This run's not only become a great source of fish for our hatcheries, but also may provide some important natural reproduction for the fishery. When walleye make spawning run in particular, we have seasonal single hook regulations and other that have the same type of run. The upper end of Dell Hollow, Center reservoirs all have single hook restrictions. So we're looking to put a seasonal single hook restriction in place January 1 through April 30th from the Highway 27 bridge in Harriman upstream to Highway 299 bridge in Oakdale. Anglers are restricted to the use of one hook having a single point or one lure having no more than one hook with a single point, artificial or bait. No more than 3 rods may be used by each angler. So again, this is to limit snagging, limit the disturbance of fish and the wounding of fish while they're trying to make their spawning run. Still in the Emery River watershed, dealing with a different fish, paddlefish. We currently have regs on the Emery River that are on the Watts Bar Reservoir. Just like the walleye, the paddlefish make a run up the Emery River and are in a pretty narrow riverine habitat when they make that run. Pretty good numbers of fish. My slide's not exactly right. You can't see it here, but that regulation on Watts Bar runs from May 1st to May 15th, and it is 1 paddlefish per day through that time period, and it's a snag fishery. Like I said, it's a large run into a small area, very easy to target those fish. Historically, most of the pressure on Watts Bar has taken place at the Fort Loudon tailwater, but TWA Fisheries and LE staff have seen a significant increase in the fishing pressure on the Emery in recent years. Survey work in Watts Bar, that Watts Bar Reservoir, that part of the Tennessee River, has shown that paddlefish stocks in that reservoir have issues with recruitment. It's highly variable and often is made up, the population or the stocks are made up of older individuals. Because the Emery's free-flowing and not susceptible to the effects of dam-controlled flows, it provides a consistent, good spawning habitat and is a real benefit to the recreational fishery in Watts Bar. Protecting this important spawning area is key to sustaining the fishery. So we're proposing to close the Emery River to snagging, harvest, and possession of paddlefish. This would be a closure that starts at the mouth of the river, as you see highlighted in red, and it would run up to the 299 bridge in Oakdale, just like the walleye reg. Our LE staff have had numerous reports of illegal activity there, including finding fish with eggs cut out of them and just laid out floating in the river. This is a remote area and is a real challenge to work, especially with the pressure that takes place at Fort Loudon Dam, which brings up a key point. Fishermen will still have access to the paddlefish fishery at places like Fort Loudon and Melton Hill dams. So we see that closing this area will benefit the fishery and next, we'll move to Norris Reservoir up in Region 4. Managed under a seasonal strategy. Warmer months, the daily krill limit is reduced to 1, And in the cooler months, the daily creel limit is set at 5 fish. The goal for this regulation is to reduce summer associated with handling. There's also a minimum length limit with each of these seasons. Currently, there's a 20-inch minimum length limit in the warmer months and an 18-inch minimum length limit in the cooler months. The strategy has not really proved to do much with the size structure, and very few smallmouths grow larger than 18 inches, and even fewer grow larger than 20. So we're proposing to change this minimum length limit and go with an 18-inch minimum length limit in the warmer months and a 15-inch minimum length limit in the cooler months. The goal of the proposal is to improve the size structure and allow tournament anglers better access to fish during the cooler season. Norris Reservoir anglers have been interviewed and prefer the reduced size limit over the current regulation, and the members of the Norris Lake Fisheries Advisory Committee have been briefed and either support or do not oppose the regulation. Going up to Northeast Tennessee and still in Region 4, the Boone Reservoir, and this proposal applies to the striped bass fishery we have there. Since 2008, the fishery in Boone has been managed under a split season. During the warmer months, the daily creel has been 2 with a 15-inch minimum. And during the cooler months, the daily creel limit has been 1 with a 36-inch minimum length limit. It was thought that the post-release mortality was higher in the summer months, and that was the reason for the higher creel and shorter length for the minimum length limit in the warmer months. This year, we received a request from striper fishermen on Boone to look into applying the daily creel limit of 1 with a 36-inch minimum length limit all year long. Our staff considered this and do feel that temperatures are good in Boone for this change. The water temps are cooler in Boone with the South Fork of the Holston River and Watauga River tailwaters providing cooler flows. So we're proposing to move to that year-round daily creel limit of 1, with a minimum length limit of 36 inches. Staying on Boone, Boone Reservoir consistently provides trout habitat year-round, and large brown trout are regularly caught. From our creel surveys on Boone, we've learned that the average brown trout harvested ranges from 5 to 6 pounds. That's a really good fish. Boone anglers have expressed interest in protecting these resources, and we've also had. So we coming forward with a proposal because it looks like the conditions will allow for release of those larger fish, and we're proposing to take what is currently on the South Fork of the Holston River, which is a 16 to 22-inch protected length range, and that's on all trout, 7 fish, but only 1 over 22, and bring that back up to DeVault Bridge on the Watauga Arm. We stopped it there at the Watauga Arm because the Watauga tailwater is completely different strategies. It has a quality zone sandwiched between 2 areas that just have statewide regs, and we had concerns about people being in conflict with regulations because of access patterns as well, and ending up coming into an area that had that PLR and possibly, being in violation of possession of illegal fish. So we cut it off there at the DeVault Bridge on the Watauga River. Next couple of proposals are related to trout fisheries. They're a little bit different, each of them, but they're related to some special trout fisheries. First is Buffalo Creek. It's in Region 4 as well. Buffalo Creek on the Buffalo Springs WMA is an intensively managed trout fishery. And our proposal is geared at reducing illegal harvest of stock trout under the guise of collecting bait, as currently minnow seining is allowed on Buffalo Creek. Regional LE staff get regular reports of illegal activity, and with the coordination with them and our fisheries staff, they are recommending that we close Buffalo Creek to the harvest of bait, and we also possess seines, cast nets, and minnow traps. And again, this is geared at reducing illegal harvest on our stock trout. Our next proposal deals with Clear Creek. Clear Creek is a tributary of the Clinch River below Norris Dam. Norris is one of our best in the state, and it has a run of rainbow trout that'll go up Clear Creek. And for some time, it's had a closed fish season, November 1 through March 31st, to protect those fish, those spawning fish. It's a small creek, stacked up, one of those scenarios where they're very vulnerable, and they are contributing to the fishery through the spawning process. So it's been closed November 1 through March 31st from the Highway 441 road there to the second dam, that other arrow that you. And we're proposing to close it to the harvest of bait, and no possession of bait collecting gear is defined in the bait proclamation. So it'll help with limiting illegal activity and allow our law enforcement staff to better manage activity in those areas. That is all of our proposals for 2023. If there's any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
No questions?
Early on in the presentation, you talked about a lot of the smaller lakes that you were making some changes to, and you dropped the real limit on one or two of them because of depression. Can you do any stocking with those lakes?
Catfish, and it depends on the ones you're talking about. Like, yes, go back to the Region 3 one is a good one. Our fisheries staff out there do a lot of work with municipalities, so we're out there doing survey work on them, and our partners with US Forest Service. And in the surveys that they had done, pretty much it indicated that we'd had an overharvest on those bluegill and red ear. And so trying to spread the harvest out and impact size structure a little bit, make it a little better. We do stock bluegill or red ear sunfish on occasion. We also stock catfish in places like that. That's a lot with the 5 fish per day because a lot of times we're stocking catchable catfish. And it's, it just helps spread that resource out over more anglers.
Mark, on that same slide, the catfish, I guess all those catfish are channel cat,
Yes.
so the 34-inch wouldn't apply.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And on the, let's see, on the walleye, where you reduced it to a single hook, why would you not make it illegal to snag as you did the next slide for paddlefish?
Well,
You didn't think about that?
no, that's just the management that we put in place that it's still illegal to snag. So by definition, if you're fishing in that manner and even if you're raking a jig over across a shoal, you're still, if you'll think about that paddlefish slide, it had a definition for snagging. It's still illegal to do that. The single hook makes it a lot harder.
So it's illegal to snag walleye already?
During that season, it is illegal to snag walleye.
Okay, all right. And I had a quick comment. You said you showed that 122-pound blue cat. I've got no scientific proof, but I believe these bigger catfish are a direct result of our trophy management of these 34-inch fish over the last 18, 19 years. I think you're seeing the results of that.
Well, we have some great fishing here, that's for sure. And catfish fishing is big here in Tennessee. It's important to the state.
Chief, you mentioned Carroll Lake in conjunction with several others. When we took over the management of that lake a year or so ago, when Deputy Fish was still in position, there was discussion about the management, assessment of species in the lake and how that we would move forward. In conversation with one of our guides today, then the conversation was such about the composition of different fish in that lake. Can you expound a little bit on where we're going with that? Is there any bait fish in that lake, or any plans for that in relation to the other species, or just what are we doing there at Carroll Lake?
There's
Commonly
Carroll
known as
Lake,
the
and then
1,000 acre lake.
there's Carroll Lake, and then there's Lake
Lake
Halford,
Halford.
and which was 1,000 acre lake. So two different lakes, still managed, by us and places that we put work into. We've done at Lake Halford habitat work, forage stocking. So we've been working on the forage base there, and there's been work done in, as far as stocking forage fish.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, commissioners? Chief, that's a lot of information that you went over there. We appreciate it. Thank you for your
Welcome.
time and all your
You're
research and your all your personnel, all the time they put into that. I've seen that gentleman that caught that record state catfish a lot of times over there on the Cumberland, because every time I've been there, he's been there. I haven't put one in my boat that size yet.
I'm wondering if IFGA has a Barbie rod class. We may need to look into that.
That
You're
would
not
be
getting
cool.
my Barbie pole.
No?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I have
Yeah, I'll fish right next to it. I know it. We're close.
I have one more presentation. I have commercial.
These
So-
planer boards. Go. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. So up next, we have our commercial fishing regulation preview. I want to make sure that everybody knows about the Commercial Fishing Advisory Committee, or you'll hear it called CFAC, or the committee probably throughout the presentation. The committee was established in 2011 to ensure the views of the commercial fishing community, to ensure that those views are communicated to the agency. Played to form the committee. The members are appointed by the executive director of TWRA. It's composed of commercial fishers and buyers, and members serve as volunteers. We meet with to discuss commercial fishing in Tennessee, and the committee has really become a key partner to the agency in managing commercial fishing. They are a great partner. A little bit about that process. We usually meet in early summer in June. Like I said, talk about commercial fishing. They bring recommendations to us. We bring things to them to talk about. We leave that meeting, and on some of the recommendations, we come back or all of them really, come back to TWRA, work with our law enforcement partners in the agency, and go through these things and work through them and see what we can and can't do, and come back with a view today, and then we'll bring it back to you in September for a vote. And topics we talked about. One was harvesting invasive carp in proximity to marinas on Kentucky Reservoir. Some of the folks out there fishing had been approached by marina owners, and there's often space between the areas that are legal to fish at 300 yards to a marina is the limit that you still got carp. And the goal is they brought a recommendation or request about on hoop nets and slap baskets. We talked about gear issues, gear loss issues, and the TWRA response to that. April and May time restrictions for fishing They made a request that we end the contract system for cheap reservoirs. It's a little bit different setup there than in other parts of the state. They requested that we work on signage or PSAs regarding commercial fishing. And they also asked us to do an assessment of temperature trends during the paddlefish season. We brought to the committee a report on changing our daily commercial row fishing report to reflect the gravid female only fishery, which was recently passed by the commission, and also adding a discard column that allows us to track quality of eggs through the season, particularly through that latter part of the season. We also discussed issues with repeated checking of paddlefish. If you can see it in that picture, I can kind of see it. I've got 4 spots on that fish that are circled with a red circle. The regulation that's in place says that a paddlefish can be checked 2 times during a season for ripe eggs. And we've had some confusion out in the field with fishers interpreting that rule, and a fish can get checked by one person 2 times and then another person 2 times. We had discussions about changing the regulations a little bit, but we came out of it with the consensus to this year put a fact sheet out on how to properly check the paddlefish and clearly describe how that regulation's applied in the field. And we are going to see how that goes out into the next season. So around that assessment of water temperatures during the commercial paddlefish season, like I said, they asked us to look at the water temps on the Tennessee and Cumberland River reservoirs. A review of the temperature data did show a warming trend near the end of the season on the lower Tennessee River and Kentucky Reservoir. When we saw that, we wanted to get together with the group and talk to them about it and work through the process. And so we met with them on August 16th to go over the data. The data that we collected was from TVA discharge data at dams. And so that's 1 point in each one of those assessment and get multiple points, especially on Kentucky Reservoir. The East Tennessee reservoirs look good in terms of water temp through the season. But we're going to put some data loggers out that can record daily temperatures and really assess this a little more thoroughly over a broader scale. And then we'll work with the committee on any recommendations that follows next year. So with all that we're bringing to you today, and that one, the first one is related to the harvest of invasive carp near marinas on Kentucky Lake. This is for Kentucky Reservoir only. And the proposal is to reduce the distance that commercial fishermen can use whip sets in proximity to commercial boat docks from 300 yards to 300 feet from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. Monday through Thursday. Eric Gaines, our commercial fishing coordinator, reached out to marina owners on Kentucky Lake. Team approved of the move and really want us to maximize that harvest in those areas. The next recommendation we have is related to those. Can I go back one? Thank you. Related to marking requirements. This is a statewide proposal. And the proposal is to remove the current float requirements and allow hoop nets and slat baskets to be marked with tags attached to the gear. So these are the requests from the committee and the things that we discussed. Out of those, we are moving forward with the harvesting in proximity to the marinas. We are proposing to change the marking requirements, which we all feel will help with the gear loss issues, as they related that they felt like the floats were leading to more tampering or theft of gear even. The April and May time restrictions was briefly discussed, and Both parties felt that we did not need to consider it further, that things were good where they are. The request to end the contract system for Cheatham and Old Hickory reservoirs, we did not move forward with that. We consulted with our law enforcement staff, our fisheries managers in that area, and they felt because of the striped bass fishery that we have and the nature of the fishery and in kind of the setting that it happens in, that being able to have that contract system in place allows us to even better communicate to the fishing public about what's happening on there. It allows us to understand how much fishing pressure is happening. We are not proposing to change that. The signage or the PSAs regarding commercial fishing, we're gonna work on that and see what we can do. You know, I feel like over the last few years, we've really tried to always make people aware of the value of commercial fishing in Tennessee and the role that it plays, not only in just the culture of the state and the economy of the state, but also in cases like with invasive carp and the role that they're playing, which is huge. You know, so we are definitely always trying to keep in mind that we need to, you know, let people know about commercial fishing out there. So we're gonna see what we can do with that, and I think we've already made headway on that. And then we did do the assessment of temperature trends during the paddlefish season, and we're going to come back on that next year, and probably be talking about that next year to you guys. All right. That concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions.
Commissioners, any questions?
Would you explain the contract system? What does that mean?
Oh, so people are signed in, they're contracted, they have to report when they're fishing. There is a zone that they can't fish on it. Do we have, I'm going to reach out to Eric. Do we have a cap on the number of people on those? We don't have a cap. It's just simply that they have to call in. You're welcome.
Chief, I would like to ask Eric, is there anything else you'd like to add? Or I know is Clay in here as well? I know you've been very, oh, there you go. I know you've been very instrumental in a lot of this as well. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
That's what CFAC recommended.
Chief, we appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Chairman, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Blue. Anyone else from the public to comment on the commercial fishing regulation? All right, no one? Okay. Hearing that, we're going to take a 10-minute break, okay? So see you back in 10.
I can tell you the hardest one that has been for me has been the rainbow trout. It's 24 inches. I have been fishing for that fish for 10 years. I've caught 21 now.
What do you lack?
The black crappie, the bowfin, the long-nosed gar, the sauger. Goal is now to get them all.
Well, good luck to catching them all. I think that's
No
awesome.
doubt.
Yeah.
The award-winning Tennessee Wildcast is on the air with the latest on hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. Make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee Wildcast. We're glad you're tuning in. Thanks for watching and for listening. We're back at the Holston General Store here in Morristown, Tennessee at the Region 4 office, and we are just excited to be here. Mr. Matt Cameron's been hosting us for a series of shows.
Yeah, buddy.
And it's been fun.
We've had a good time, some great guests. Got another great show lined up for you today.
Yeah. So next to Matt is our co-host, Sally Petrie. She just joined us for a show and thought we'd bring her back and do another one. So appreciate her joining us. But our guest today is Andrew Paduch. He is the first to achieve Master Level 5 in the TARP program.
TARP.
TARP.
Tell them what that is.
Tennessee Angler Recognition Program.
Almost sounds like another species of fish, a tarp.
Yeah.
Tarpon, carp. It's like a hybrid.
So I'm excited to hear how some of his fishing adventures and what it was like to reach that level and all the fun stuff that we're going to dive into today. But if you're not familiar with TARP, go to our website, tmwildlife.org, click on the fishing tab and scroll down. You'll see some information on TARP. You can also look at see the Tennessee Angler Recognition information in our fishing guide. What page is that, Sally?
47.
Page 47 of the fishing guide. And so go check it out, read up on it, get some information. We're going to try to cover a lot of it today. First of all, Andrew, thank you for being with us.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, it's your friend, one of our commissioners, Tommy Woods, called me and said, hey, I think he was at a meeting. He said, hey, my buddy just reached that level 5. You need to get him on one of your shows. I said, yeah, we'll do that. So I'm glad you're here, and I'm excited to learn about your fishing adventures and learn a little bit about you. If you don't mind, share a little bit of your background and what you do.
Well, first off, I can promise you there will be some fish stories today.
Okay.
No matter how big or how small, they're guaranteed. I think that's one of those things that goes hand in hand with fishing. But I've been fishing for a long time. I mean, I've been at it since as long as I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
Never caught much growing up with my old man. But the big outings way back when were just to catch fish, and it boiled down to carp because we could catch a carp.
Yeah.
As bad as that sounds, it started with a carp, and it was a method in which we would go. He always made it fun, so I enjoyed it. We would go light line, catch carp. And carp, as anyone knows, I mean, everybody downplays them, but when you're a kid, you're 6, 7, 8 years old. You just want to throw them in the pole. You don't care what it is. And the bigger, the better.
Yes. Yeah, they get big.
They do. So, in essence, it started as it was a good method in which to learn how to catch a big fish on light line. And the light line has served many good experiences over the year with it. And that's what separates a lot of people, I feel like, from catching fish is obviously it's a method in which they do it, but everybody always wants to go in gangbusters. It'd be like shooting a raccoon with a 50 caliber gun. I mean, it just doesn't work, right? And I think a lot of people get entrapped in sometimes bigger is better, heavier lines, so they get the fish in. And ultimately, if you can fish, you can fish. And it's just there's a learning curve there, but there's definitely tricks to the trade that help you catch those fish.
Yeah.
But it's all about a presentation and desire to get out there and do it when you need to do it, not when you want to do it.
And the challenge, I like that light line idea. It's just the challenge of reeling those bigger fish in on that lighter line, and it's a different type of fishing.
It is. It is. I mean, and I have a 6-year-old that is completely enamored with it. And just to put it in context of how important the line is, I fish exclusively. If I could give one person the number one rule to catching bigger fish is lighter line and fluorocarbon. And it was very apparent what was going on. I took a gentleman fishing with my son. We were catching fish just one right after the other. Trout, nice trout, anywhere from 15 to his biggest one that day was 29 inches. And I had caught 8 fish before the gentleman I took had caught one. And he said, I want to take my pole. Okay, whatever.
Right.
And he was using mono and 10-pound test. Never got one bite. And we had caught 8 before I gave him my pole.
Okay. I was wondering when that point was.
It just gets to the point like, man, come on, here.
Yes,
He took one
I
of
want you
mine.
to enjoy this.
Yes, I've done this. And here, take it. And as soon as he did, first cast, it's just like someone threw a light switch. And it boiled down to, it wasn't the method in which it was being delivered. It boiled down to something as simple as the fishing line.
And why does fluorocarbon make that much difference over mono?
It's just a transparency thing. I mean, you use a light fluoro, it just disappears. And I fish a lot in saltwater as well. And it's just as big deal down there as it is in freshwater. And again, it's that line diameter. Sometimes you can't get down there. You can't get bit on 30-pound test, but you drop to 20 and you get eaten all the time. But the problem with 20 is you can't get the fish in because he's too big. So it's a darned if you do, darned if you don't type thing.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles sometimes.
So you started fishing at a young age and continued your whole life. Sounds like you've been doing it for a while.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm 40 years old. And literally have had a fishing pole in my hands, catching creek chubs for as long as I can remember.
Yeah. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up fishing?
I grew up in Johnson City. I'm a local boy.
Yeah.
And like I said, we mainly fished on Watauga Lake. And growing up, we loved the lake because of how pretty it is, right?
Oh yeah, beautiful.
But we called it the Dead Sea. Everybody would go up there, or we would go up there and flog it. And very seldom caught a big fish. I still remember the biggest fish I ever caught out of that when I was a youngster was about a 3-pound smallmouth. And it was like the holy grail. And took it home and mounted it. Still have it to this day. I mean, and I'm sitting there thinking, now I look back on that thinking, yeah, times were desperate back then.
As a good fight, though, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, it was.
It
was for sure.
Yeah, I could say that our waters all across the state have come a long way. I mean, we've had some good fishing, but it's getting better and better.
I travel quite a lot. I just got back from Michigan grouse hunting for a week.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
So I'm all over this country. And whether it's fishing or traveling or work, it's East Tennessee for trophy fish, going by strictly size, is second to none to anywhere in the country. Now, you might have some larger bass down south, but outside of the bass, you ain't going to beat it. I mean, you're just simply not going to do it. And you have stripers. We've caught them 50, 60 pounds. You have the hybrids. I think it's 23 pounds is the state record. I've come within 2 pounds several times.
Whoa.
The trout fishing, I don't care what you're trying to catch. Now, obviously, the brook or the cutthroats out west, they're bigger. They've been around longer. Those are probably a fish that's a little harder to come. But the browns and rainbows, you're not going to beat them, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, if you find them, you're just not going to beat them. It's just the way it is.
That's Sally's wheelhouse. She's in streams, rivers, fisheries. So she can talk trout with you.
Yeah. There we go.
She's probably hearing this, getting pretty excited, thinking, "Oh, good, the work that we're doing is paying off." I know your colleagues would love to hear this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
It truly is. I mean, state agencies are a lot of things, guys, but TWA, I mean, and he's just blowing smoke. I cannot express to you guys how well the fisheries. I mean, especially where I fish, how well it's doing. Now, things can always be tweaked. Things can always get better.
Sure.
Regardless of where you're at or who you are. But in the realm of just good fish, quality fish, can't beat it. For freshwater fish, you cannot beat East Tennessee. Period.
Awesome.
And this is an unpaid.
This message brought to you by now.
We have some great partners too that help us. Our tailwaters. We work a lot with TVA on how to release the water and things like that to help the quality of the water so that the fish are,
cold water, super oxygenated, can't beat it. Tailwater fishing is as good as it gets anywhere. I don't care where the tailwater is. That's where the fish are going to want to be certain times of the year.
Yeah. Well, before we get too deep, let's talk about the TARP program and just a few stats that I was able to dig up. The first TARP certificate was given out in 2003. So this program's been around a while, and
almost 20 years.
Yeah. Wow. 20 years.
It's hard to
I
believe.
graduated high school in 2003. Brad Golden, and he was the first one to get a certificate. And then the first master level 1 was our own Jim Habera in 2004, January 2004. So, just to give you a few stats on when it kind of got started. But today, we have Andrew with us to talk about reaching that level 5. And I kind of want to hear some of the stories of how you got to that level and what was maybe some of the first fish you caught that qualified, and what led you down the list to start getting these certificates and reach those levels.
Well, the list starts by accident. I have I used to fish a lot with my cousin Derek, and he was hooked up with another gentleman who fished and caught a lot of big fish. And so the progression of how to catch those fish started way back in the early 2000s for us. I believe my first one was either a striper or a hybrid. And so you start there. You start with a fish. And I was in school, then working, so fishing kind of took a back step. But then it comes full circle, comes back around. When you get firmly in a place, you start going. And the list starts of what can I catch to knock off the list. You always go with the easiest. It's human nature for God knows what reason. So you start with the easy ones.
Like a bluegill?
Well,
what's easy for you? It depends.
That's exactly right. And it all depends on where you're at and what you're used to catching. And I'm one of my faults is I'm not a artificial guy.
So everything's been live bait.
Almost everything.
Almost, yeah.
I mean, some of the fish you catch, so many of the tarps that you catch them and they just go back in.
Yeah.
And you don't even think anything about it anymore. But I'm a live bait person. Anywhere from, I don't care what it takes. You say, Andrew, you can go catch a 30-inch trout on a night crawler. Sign me up. Or, hey, go catch some creek chubs and you'll go catch a wall. I don't care. I'm in it to, I want to catch fish. I like to go catching, not fishing. So again, that's human nature.
Yeah.
And it starts there. And you hear a story, you're on these Facebook pages, you see where people are fishing, what they're catching, not necessarily how they're catching, but they're catching the fish. And then it's up to you to figure it out. So it starts, the Master Angler 1 is just catch 5 citation fish. Doesn't matter what they are.
And you said your first one was a stripe or a hybrid. So that was a 40 or a 30-inch fish.
Sure.
For your first one.
I believe the hybrid was 33. It's still, to this date, one of the only fish I've caught that I didn't, and I return everything. I don't
Catch and release.
Catch and release.
Yeah.
That hybrid was 33 inches and weighed right at 20 pounds.
Wow.
And I released him in the hopes of catching him when he weighed over 23 pounds for the state record. It's probably, I think it's one of 2 fish in my life that I wish I'd kept him mounted. So it's just one of those things. And I don't catch and eat them. It's if I want a good fillet of something, I'll just walk down to Kroger and get me something.
So before we get too deep, just so I got the things in line here, I've never entered tarp. I don't know exactly, but do you measure this on site and show a picture of the measurement, and how do you make sure it's qualified?
Well, there's actually 2 different methods in which you can do it. The first one being you're fishing with a buddy, a partner, somebody on the bank, a witness. So, and honestly, it's a honor thing.
Honor system.
It's an honor system. And to me, there's no virtue in trying to attain a goal that you're cheating yourself. There's no reason to do that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anything to anyone other than yourself, or in my instance, me. And so you have a lot of time invested in these different fish of trying to catch them of certain sizes. So back to the original question, you have to have a witness that signs off on it, that it was X number of inches long, where it was, what it was caught on, etc. You release the fish. The second one being, if you were fishing by yourself, you put a ruler on the deck and you hope to guide you and get your fish to hold still for long you to dig your cell phone out and for you to snap a picture,
not knock it in the water.
And so once you do that, you submit it to you folks.
Yeah.
And you guys certify it and send it back. Super easy.
Was it a quick turnaround when you send these in?
It all varies.
Okay, we may not need to go down that road. Then, sorry.
Well, I mean, again, it doesn't really matter, but sometimes they come back in a week and sometimes it takes a month. So
Yeah, okay.
it just depends on how busy you folks are.
Exactly.
And every business, regardless of what you are, there's ups and downs. So it takes some time.
Exactly. Turnover, things like that.
So you're level 5.
Yes, sir.
What does it take to become a tarp level 5 angler?
It takes a lot of time.
How much time do you think it's taken?
I don't know.
When you started?
I can tell you the hardest one that has been for me has been the rainbow trout. That number is out of whack. It's 24 inches.
Yeah.
And maybe it's out of whack for the method in which I fish. Let's put it that way. I have been fishing for that fish for 10 years. Of 24. Now, if you said how many 23 and a half inches have you caught, I'd probably say close to 50. That 23, the 23 to 24 it's not an easy fish, but you definitely can catch them.
Yeah.
That 24 inch or bigger for a rainbow
it's hard.
It's hard.
That's
Yeah.
big.
It's
That
hard.
really is big. I mean, you think about it. 2 rulers.
Yeah.
That's
No,
it's a
I mean,
big.
Do you have any input on that?
No, I agree. It's hard. It's hard. And I know from talking from Jim, who's on your list of the first level 1 angler.
Yeah, Jim. He's a biologist here in Region 4.
Yeah, he always says, he's like, man, if I could just get another 1/4 inch out of a fish, it's like, so I
stretcher.
get that. Yeah, yeah.
But your son caught a 29er.
Well, we
Is that
got
right?
he did, and for Christmas I actually got a replica made of it.
Oh,
coming.
cool. That's cool.
So, but we got on a bite this year that was unbelievable, and it was just for about a month. We would go and fish over that 24 inch mark. We'd probably catch 3 or 4 in an outing, and God only knows how many 15 to 20 to 22 inches.
Really
I
nice.
mean, you get sick of catching them. And one day we probably hooked 5 fish, and seriously, we'd set the hook and I'd hand him the pole. We've caught our fish. I've caught my fish, and it's about bringing him along with me to make sure that he does it. And so I have a fishing buddy, right? And now you can't beat him off with a stick to get him out of the boat.
Oh, yeah.
But we got on a bite. We figured something out on one of the tailwaters, and it was just unbelievable. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable. And hooked some fish we never saw. And I fish with generally 2 units of water. I don't ever fish one of our local tailwaters with 0 units, never, unless I'm trying to catch bait, which I'm sure that's gonna make you cringe.
No,
But it was one of those magical years. Now, the rainbow trout question. I caught in a trout tournament this year on Watauga Lake. Corey, John, good friend, great guy.
Yeah.
Took him and his 2 boys. And
Boy.
I was pre-fishing with another buddy of mine and caught the rainbow trout. It was like 24 1/8 inches. Caught it on my buddy, who actually is the number 2 person in the state to do this, Jamie Rudolph,
Oh, okay.
who couldn't make it. But I caught it on his pole because he was reeling in a lake trout on the other side of the boat. and he and I have been after that fish, that rainbow trout for a long time. He got it up and get it up, and there it is. It's a 24 1/8 inch, and it was like, oh my God, where'd that thing come from? but that fish kind of set the tone. We got on the rainbow trout bite, and it was unbelievable. I mean, to this day in my entire life, I've never been part of something like that. I mean, every time you'd go, we hooked fish that got spooled us. Because if you beefed the line up, you couldn't do anything. We had fish go into the dam, into the grates, which never happened. Have fish wrap you around rocks. I mean, it's just, you get a big fish on in fast water, on light line, it becomes a mess. And you better hope you have someone that can run a boat.
Yeah.
So it's
Well, any tips? We're not looking for your secret method, but for people that want to go out and catch a trout, a nice trophy-sized trout to them.
Again, it boils back to people tend to try to fish the way they think, the way they see something, the way, oh, this looks good. And this is not like an epiphany, but you go out, you try to duplicate what you think the fish are biting, whether it be a night crawler or a minnow or something to that effect. And you rig it to effect that it's more a natural presentation. And again, it goes back to fluorocarbon. I mean, and if you go back to the fluorocarbon, it helps hide the human presence to it. And I know I've harped on it already, but I can tell you it makes a tremendous difference, more so than anything else.
Yeah. Well, got any more fish stories on some of the on that list? I guess this isn't the full list. This was an early. I keep pointing at it. But this was an early poster of the TARP program, and there's only 20 fish on this one, I think it is, but there's 27, I think, fish now or something like that you can catch. What was some more of the fun ones that helped you get to this level?
The muskie.
Oh no, that is a fish I want to go after.
It's supposed to be the fish of 1,000 casts, and
it's 3 for you, right? 3 casts.
Seriously, it was.
Was it?
That's where I'm headed with this. I have a buddy that lives on the Nolechucky River, kind of down off of 107.
Interesting. Huh.
And well, I've always heard my entire life that those fish are there, right?
Yeah.
Well, he said, Andrew, I saw somebody catch one. I said, Jerry, you just don't go see somebody catch a 40-inch muskie. It's just, he said, I did. Well, his property borders, he said, come down. I'll even show you what they're throwing. We go down there, and it's a whopper plopper in its early stages, and the big whopper plopper. And we're down there on the side of a bank. It's muddy. I'm up 5 feet off the bank, throwing out their third cast. You're actually making fun. It seriously happened like that.
Welcome back. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Wally Childress, Boating and Law.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like for Lieutenant Colonel for Boating and Law Enforcement, Matt Majors, to come forward for a proclamation presentation.
So today, Proclamation 2310, and what this is a temporary lift to a no-wake zone on Nickajack Lake in Marion County. It's right there at Marion County Park. I don't have a pointer I would show you, but it's that island right there in the center. And this will be for the Greater Jasper JC's drag boat races that are occurring October 14th and 15th. So this temporary lift will just be a daytime lift only during those drag races. And the area highlighted in yellow there, that's where they actually use that. It does not prohibit people from using Marion County Park. They still allow them to come staff there to make that happen.
I accept the motion. Is there a second? With a motion and a second, all the favors of the committee, all the commissioners on the committee say yes.
Aye.
Any opposed? Yes, passed. It's passed on to the full commission.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Commissioner Childress. This time I'd like to call Chairman of Budget, Bill Cox, to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deputy Director Frank Fiss will give us a presentation on the budget.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Okay, budget year never stops. I've learned. I want to go over our budget process, our different types of funds, and end up with our proposed budgets for 24 and 25. You'll see here that our staff start in April through July preparing these budgets. In late July, we shared this information with the commission, and mailed out the budget booklets for your review in early August. And today we are here with a proposal today and hopefully a vote tomorrow. And the next steps are in September, we'll submit this to a Commissioner of Finance and Administration. In January, it'll be included in the governor's budget, and then it'll be appear in front of at least 3 legislative budget committees. And then in April and May, the legislature will act on the final budget. We have 3 operating funds in TWRA: wildlife, boating, and wetlands, and we have very limited opportunities to move amongst these 3. We have 3 separate checkbooks, essentially. Wildlife fund is not just wildlife, it's fish, it's all the animals and habitats in the state. We can spend those dollars on that. Our funding sources for reimbursements make up most of that, and a little bit from state and other funds. Examples of projects that we would use these dollars for would be like managing a wildlife management area, trout stocking, hunting and fishing rules. We also manage ranges in the state with these dollars. The boating fund is limited to boating activity. The funding sources for it are boaters registration and the marine fuel, the gasoline to marine use. We get those dollars as well. And this year, this past fiscal year, was our first receiving additional gasoline tax money for marinas. And we'll talk about that a little. Projects that boating fund are used for are safety and education and enforcement. We also use it for boating access ramps. The wetland fund is funded through the real estate transfer tax, our portion of it, and we are allowed by law to use it for purchasing wetlands, the north areas on the North Cumberland WMA. We got a limited opportunity at Catoosa to use those funds, and those funds for maintenance of any TWRA property, be it management of habitat for wildlife or just maintaining structures. That single plate has an endowment associated with it as opposed to the other wildlife plates that you can buy. And it has about $8 million in it now. It still sells fairly well considering how old that product is. We get all of the money except for some manufacturing fee as compared to the other plates that have a bigger hit from other departments. So if you want to support TWRA, this is the best license to purchase, or best license plate to purchase. We also have an endowment associated with our lifetime sportsman licenses. Those of you that may have purchased one of them, they've been sold for some time now. We're up to $71 million in sale receipts of those licenses, plus some interest. And that the funding of that endowment is effectively ended in April of 23 this year. The law changed so that now those dollars that we collect for a lifetime license sale go into our operating funds directly. So here's where our 3 fiscal year, which ended in June, that was our balance when we started in July of 2022. You see the funds there are listed. We had expenses, we had income throughout the year, and as of these data that we have here for June 2023 on the far right are the estimates because the year is not officially closed yet. But you'll see that as an example in the wildlife fund, we started with 69 million and we're ending with 63 million and so forth down the line there. I put a total on this slide just for your convenience, but because we really can't spend all these dollars together, it's a little bit meaningless. But those balances are often referred to as reserves, and reserves are very important to TWRA. The three main reserves I'll talk about are the wildlife, boating, and wetlands. And it seems like a lot of money to have in the wildlife fund, 63 million, but it's really only 7 months of operating costs. If something were to disrupt our ability to collect revenue or things got very expensive, we need those reserves to be able to provide the services that we are expected to do every year. We also have to have money to start the year basically we front all the money for the projects that we do before we get reimbursed by federal grants. So it's important to have that piece as well. And unlike other agencies that get an apportionment to start the year, we would start it. We have to have money from last year to get started in this year because we rely so heavily on licenses and registration. Now I'll talk about a little budget jargon before I get into the rest of the presentation. Through basic definitions, a carry forward are projects that this commission has already approved, but were not completed in the last fiscal year. So we're basically just moving those money or carrying that spending authority forward to the next fiscal year. We limit this opportunity for staff to do this to grants that we have in place, maybe a contract's associated with it where it's tied up in contract, or we have a large item that we're trying to purchase or contract or project that we're trying to complete. The next item are projects that are added to the current year. We're in FY24. So if there was a new project that came along or opportunity that surprised us or thing we had to do, staff tells us we need to do this in this fiscal year. Would you please ask to get it added to the FY24 budget? Those would be expansions. And then improvements are projects that are added to our FY25 budget. Staff know that they're given a guideline to build their FY25 budget based on the previous year. If something else is coming up that they request that, and that is approved as improvement for the FY25 year, typically 14 months out from when they're working on it. We are not going to request any FY25 improvements at this meeting, although we may see subjects as expansion requests in 2024. Okay, so there were several carry forwards needed to get work to complete projects. 39 of those projects were in the wildlife fund and 2 of them were in the boating fund. Rather than go through all 39 projects, I'm going to show you some examples of this. Represents the top $15 million worth of that $18 million I showed earlier, just to give you an example of the kinds of in the carry forward realm. They're big buildings like the Buffalo Ridge building, the Buffalo Ridge Range, some water control structures we're doing on lakes in West Tennessee. A lot of construction stuff. On the boating, we have some contracts that are still in play for Clean Vessel Act. Green Cove Pond's another example of a project that is ongoing. We need to carry that money forward to complete it. This is the extent of all the wildlife. I had time to review these in your documents, so I'm not going to go through them. I guess if there's any questions on these, we could maybe hear them at the end of the presentation. But just to remind you that we do have $3 million worth of projects that we're requesting to add to the FY24 budget. And that represents about $500,000 worth of to our wildlife fund after you consider the projects. We'll run to the boating side. We have a few law enforcement projects that needed to be expanded, but the big project here is the Marina Grants Program. You'll see that's a large expansion for FY20. Marina Grants Program dollars that there was addition to the tax collected, or the portion of the tax we receive at TWRA is earmarked to give to marinas through a grant program. We collected those dollars in FY23, that about $1.8 million collected. So we need to set up a budget in 24 to give out those dollars through a grant program. So even though this is an addition of $1.8 million, it's dollars that we collected for this purpose. And it's a bit of a revenue neutral thing for us. And with that brings me to the official request for approval of the expansion. You see the dollar amounts on the screen. and then the FY24 budget is going to be much larger than the FY25 budget because it includes the carry forwards budget proposal. Are identical to what was in the book that we shared. And that is my last slide if you have any questions.
So to be clear for everyone, the 24 budget is what we're in now, and you're asking us to approve the 25, correct?
I'm asking for approval of the FY24 budget as listed on that second to the last slide, which includes the carry forward and the expansions, and we're requesting an approval of the FY25 proposal.
Okay. We have had multiple phone calls, informational meetings. I came to Nashville one day and had a meeting with Ken and Jason. I'd like to thank, as Jason did when we started, Jason and Frank and Brandon and Ken Tarkenton and his staff for working really, really hard on this. A few years ago, we were having surpluses and we budgeted some really good things, and then we got an unfunded, mandate from the administration, which I don't begrudge anybody, getting a salary bump at all, but it did kind of screw our budget up. We weren't ready for it, so we're having to, look at a lot of different things. And I would say that I'd add on that our investment accounts, it shows like we've got like all this money sitting around that, why do we need money? Well, part of it is rainy day fund, and part of it is because we're funded through license sales and no general fund money. Those funds are invested to go toward the operating budget. So that's not like we've got all this money sitting around that we can just go to. That nest egg, so to speak, those investment accounts that we're trying to maximize produce earnings for us to take into the operation of the agency. So it's just to be clear on what it looks like. We've got $160 million just sitting around doing nothing, and there's a perception out there that TWRA can give us a grant for this and that and this and that, and we try to do that, but that money is not something that we can just go to and spend the money. For the committee, are there any questions from anyone? We've had numerous opportunities to ask, or the entire commission. I'll take commission's questions. Yes, sir.
I've got lots of questions, but I think that Chairman Cox has done an outstanding job of answering that and being the liaison with deputy, and I just want to make a point for it to go on record that I appreciate all the work that Chairman Cox has put into this, and I've been one of those who have pestered him and asked a lot of questions, and going forward, I think because of the governor's mandate, then I think we have to be a little more considerate of our budget. But going forward, then we're aware of that, and so we're going to do everything that we can to operate within our means. And I appreciate everything that Deputy Fiss has done, Director Maxedon, and Chairman Cox. And I just want that stated so everybody will understand the time and the efforts that they put forward to try to make this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Butt. Pleasure. If there's no other questions, I'd entertain a motion.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any more discussion from the committee? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We'll recommend to the commission tomorrow.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Cox. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Director Maxedon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all know, we are fast approaching waterfowl season. And as that comes up, we get a lot of questions about ducks, about duck crops. We just finished our Tier 1 duck blind drawing process, and we'll start the Tier 2 phase or segment 1 starting on September 27th. That always piques a lot of interest in our waterfowl crops and what we're doing in our wildlife management areas. We get a lot of questions this year like, what's planted where? Why is this here? One of the things that's come up a lot this year is why not wall-to-wall corn? So basically, I went back and challenged the wildlife division. They worked with the communication staff. We actually solicited some private clubs, wanted to get their opinions, and I'm thankful that we were able to get Jody Pagan from Five Oaks Duck Lodge in Arkansas to sit down with Ducks Unlimited and be able to share some of their management philosophy, and then also a pretty well-known name, Ira McCauley. He's one of the owners of Habitat Flats. We've all seen a lot of stuff on Instagram these days about Habitat Flats and all their duck hunting. So they were kind enough to be able to sit down and kind of talk about their philosophy of waterfowl management. So, Mr. Chairman, if you would allow us, I'd like to show you a video that the agency put together to kind of help maybe explain why we do some of the management we do and the style of management and why we plant what we plant where.
Sure, please proceed.
All right.
There's no magic bullet in managing for waterfowl. It's to provide all the resources that goes throughout the wintering period. But you got to provide all the parts of the puzzle for him to stay all winter long.
Let's go back to the late 90s and early 2000s. We had just a few waterfowl managers that really understood wetlands management. And so really there was 3 or 4 people that were doing this. And then over time, there's been a group that's gone and got a lot more training on how we manage. And so one of the things that's new that we're doing since 2000 is managing our wildlife management areas in complexes. Just think about the Mississippi River, Alluvia Valley, and the Tennessee Valley. So we have a population of ducks that come down the Mississippi Valley. We have a population that comes down the Tennessee Valley. And so we've got multiple areas across those different river systems. And so early on, what we had was we had them pretty scattered. Luckily, we had a director, Gary Myers, that was there that really wanted to get into the land purchasing business to be able to provide for future generations. So he started putting these areas together and started doing connectivity from different WMA and different refuge system across there. So what that does now is provide more hunting opportunities. So we're managing these as complexes. And the reason we're doing this is to provide all the nutritional things that a duck needs throughout the season while they're here. Our responsibility as hunters, it's our responsibility as agency personnel to help send these ducks back fat and in good body condition. We want to be able to send these ducks back to the nesting grounds, to be able to lay a good hard egg, and to be able to produce so that we get to hunt them next year and so that future generations continue to hunt them. Not only the state and federal partners do the same thing as far as waterfowl management. You've got many people in the private sector that say do that.
Every morning during duck season, I have to get up and I have to face the crowd. That means I got to take our guests out with our guides, come back successful, and that innately pushes you every day to try to make the land better, to be more successful for these folks that are coming in. And those monies are gleaned to put it back into the resources. I mean, when you run a duck club for a 60-day season, and in 25, it'll be 20 years. Every day, the grind, watching those birds, how they utilize the different habitats. Well, you know, if we know these ducks need these resources, we can go to a book like that. But watch them on weather events and watch them when they go to the moist soil. Then I'll tell you when it really, the light bulbs come on in November of 2006, 7 ducks. Had 40 acres of corn planted back there. Really good. That was the most mild winter we've seen since the 80s. It was the 4th mallard harvest year we ever had on fire. But I say that to say, I said, look, you putting all your eggs in one basket. If you're going to grow all one crop on a duck club, you're going to fail. And so then we go flip 90 degrees and start going more moist soil, you know, more native weeds. It's because the ducks need that. You know, people say, they hire me, they say, where do I need to put my duck line? And I said, well, let's let the ducks tell us and then we'll put it there. Does that make sense? So if you're watching those birds day in and day out, and especially when we have older cohorts of birds, when we don't have a good hatch, put all corn out there and see what happens to you. They're going to beat you because they're smart. But So instead of seeing huge numbers of ducks on one field, short window, I'm trying to keep ducks here from Halloween until they go home in March.
I'm a veterinarian. I live in Missouri. I'm the founder of Momarsh. So when you think about products like Invisalab, Invisman, Final Stand, you know, those are all products that I developed back in the day. I'm also one of the original founders of Habitat Class. It's an outfitting operation. A couple out in Missouri, lots up in Canada, have lots in Kansas. We've hunted around quite a bit, but he's one of my partners there. He's our manager. And so we do a lot of planning, and he does a lot of work on trying to make sure that we're providing a good variety of proteins, carbs, whether it's in the way of invertebrates or seeds or shelter for the ducks. In my opinion, there's three things the duck really needs. He needs water, he needs food, and he needs shelter. In our opinion, the best way to do that is by offering them a variety of different things. So early, we want them to have invertebrates, shallow water. We use mowing as a technique to help to get that invertebrate bloom. We're doing that in our moisture test.
Corn's not a bad thing. A hot crop's a good thing. It's just when the temperature changes. I'll give a good example. So I had somebody inquire with me back last year that said, hey, I want to know why Tennessee National, one of my great partners, is not knocking down more corn. They do this on the federal refuge over there. Not our refuge, but USFWS Wildlife Services refuge. And so I said, you know what? They don't have to knock any corn down. I said, we've had no cold days. And I said, let's get the truck and ride over there right now and take a look and see what's happening. Let's see where the ducks are today. They literally had at least 100 or more corn knocked down on the ground, had low water in it or shallow water where the ducks would get to the corn and feed. We did not see a duck in the corn that day. We were in 40s, 50s, I don't remember the exact temperature, but when they rode around, there was a lot of ducks on the refuge, but they were all in the moist soil. So there's no need to plant more corn. There's no need to knock more corn down. If the ducks aren't using it, then there's no need to be able to put more on the ground and have them in that tight habitat. And so as these temperatures are no longer 25 degrees or colder for a lot of days during the season, it's more important now than ever that we provide this diversity, have these areas of more soil production, and we have aquatic invertebrates that are available for them.
One thing that we think about is when they get here, they travel, some of them over 1,000 miles in one flight without stopping. And when they get here, what we need to do for them is provide them the protein and the essential nutrients and all things that they need to refuel from that migration so that they can prepare themselves for the cold, harsh winter if we're going to have one.
That after hunting season use may be the most important time for these WMAs. You've got overlapping life history things going on there. The birds are paired up. They're going through a body feather molt, and they're also getting their energy to make that northern migration again. That time period is when they need moist soil plants and invertebrates more than ever.
Corn is a crop. It is strictly a carbohydrate. It's no different than human chose to live their life on the earth. It's just not enough.
Every single duck needs different things, every different thing. And the good Lord had put it in their DNA to know what to search for to be successfully healthy and to parent and then to breed and help support. And that means they need scrub stuff, they need hot tools like your rice, corn, milo, millet, small grains. They need moist soil. They need bars of weapons like our great US bars and our native wood bottles. All of those things are good. And one of those things in everything that you got on the farm is bad.
Ducks love corn for a couple reasons. One, it's a high carb, big ticket item when it comes, when things get tough and it's cold, they'll eat it if they can get to it. And then it's also really good roosting cover. So they love to be in corn at night. It's safe, it's warm relatively, and it helps them insulate the water sun and good protection from the sun. Corn has its place and time, but corn also, if you want to make your ducks nocturnal, plant a bunch of corn, and you'll see those patterns change. The more flooded corn you have, and the more utilization of that, and access to that they have, the more generally not going to be less than usual. Less. But having said that, there is value to corn, and we do manage some places and some stuff for corn.
People ask a question, why not wall to wall? The things that you've probably seen in places that we plant corn is once the corn's gone, the ducks are gone. If we go in and we plant wall to wall corn, ducks start coming into those areas after 3 o'clock in the evenings, and they're feeding hard on that corn. 60,000 ducks can wipe out a lot of corn. And then what happens? They quit coming back that area altogether. More soil production is much different. There's several different things that ducks use for more soil production. They're going to eat the seed that are provided there. They're going to eat a lot of the crop components, but these provide a lot of nutritional value to the duck. You can send the duck back to better body condition. And the good thing is that keep coming back to nutrients all throughout the season.
Studying sort of in captive situations and so forth, but now we can study it out in the wild. Metabarcoding, taking fecal samples and running that through some genetic analysis to identify what these birds are eating on your property. Talk about some of that. Y'all are starting to do that here with some of your researchers, some of your director of the 5.0 Research Center. And what are y'all learning?
A lot. So, you know, if a duck eats it and he likes it, it's very frequent in his diet, don't you think you ought to manage for it? So, okay, well, we didn't get much corn because we don't raise a lot. But of these samples that the guys take, Dr. Ashton's looking at this data, and, you know, I'm learning after 30 years of managing ducks, you know, they are, we always knew they ate chufa, right? But they eat the yellow nutsack seeds too, and they're high frequency in their diet. So instead of me putting permit out in the edge of the rice field and killing it, we're growing it. And so, you know, broadleaf single grass, we knew they loved the smart weeds. I still don't know why it's hard as the seeds are. It may be something to do with grit, you know, grit. But they love it. And whatever bugs are associated with it, they definitely love that. We do a lot of different cultural practices, whether we bleeded rolling, fall mowing, fall disking, to increase populations in birds. We really want to, for the next 5 years, maybe really study more about those underwater critters. Do management practices to increase them, whether it be in the forest, whether it be in moist soil. But man, just to see that every duck, just about the majority of the ducks that were shot, healthy wood means healthy mallard means dead.
That's what turns the train. That's what the state doctor.
I did a Hubbard Irving one in Mississippi one time. We looked at, we did about 5 years where me and Rob Stockett was going in and saying, we had a good crop of acorns, a bad crop of acorns, or jam up. If you look at duck harvest against those, the 4 years, 4 kill on mallard, the highest of the yield of the acorns, the highest the yield of the harvest. So I'm like, let's feed the trees, let's do thinning, let's do whatever we can to promote better habitat conditions in the forest. Just like in a ag field, we're going to do everything we can to make more acorns and more habitat available for the ducks at the right depth at the right time. You know, it all lines up. And I wish we could educate people in that, because it's not rocket science. It's do what the duck wants to do instead of what the hunter wants to do.
Really, one of the things that we have been tasked with is farming in areas where we really shouldn't be farming. So, and here's what I mean by that. We're actually farming in the annual floodplain. One interesting thing about Kentucky Lake is, if you think about where we're farming, we're actually below the level of the lake. So think about that, trying to put a crop below the level of the lake. That's what we're doing. So really, we probably shouldn't be farming in that area. Only what we own, so we're trying to make the best use of that. That move over to the Ohio. Again, what we're doing, we're farming in the annual floodplain. So what does that mean? That means that area overhangs floods every year, and what's happening along the period of time. And so what we're doing, we're all seeing at the time, have seen at the time, is we're getting longer floods. The duration of the flood lasts longer, the flood frequency is more often. And so just this year alone, you all probably know we received several big rains in July, several big rains in August. And you might say, hey, these rains aren't normal. We had as much as 50 inches throughout the USC. Well, what we've seen is historically, we can look at that over time. And yes, they are becoming more frequent. So what happens when you're farming at a very low elevation, and you get a rain event many times now, there's 2 inches of rain. Now, more soil plants can survive. What we're doing, we're getting the lowest elevations, more soil, and we're trying to get higher elevations and plant those on hot dogs. So we're saying this year out the house, people will go down.
Sorry about the technical difficulties, guys. We can fix the music in about 1 minute if you'll this. That way you can actually hear what's going on in the video. All right, we're going to get this loaded up right now.
Start over from the beginning.
If y'all would like to watch from the beginning, the volume is much better on this other version. This is a technical difficulty that comes when you listen on computer speakers versus tall Bose speakers. 1 minute.
A minute, but one of the things that you can also look at online, and this is really for the hunters, you know, besides this video, we've got crop reports that are uploaded by area. As you all know, we took some pretty significant flooding in July and August and just want to get this out there. A lot of people will come from across the state to come to our tier 2 sites, and they'll show up. And especially when you get to far west Tennessee on the Old Mine River, we had a lot of overbank flooding. It has pretty much flooded all of our crops out there. There's still some on thorny cypress that are good. There's some areas of pagoda that are good. We don't want our hunters to show up and not know that. So we're going to post, there'll be some YouTube videos that are actually uploaded by site of each area that's going to show you what the conditions look like. Again, I don't know if most of you know, but the Union City area got 14 inches of rain at one point. Anytime you get that, you're just not going to sustain in these areas that we plant. One of the things, in case we don't get the video loaded, that you'll see in there, Emily's telling me it's going to happen. But, you know, one of the unique things you saw.
There's no magic bullet.
Ready? You heard from Kelvin with TVA earlier. And so a couple of unique things about what we're farming, the wetlands that we're actually farming. And that's what we're doing. We're farming wetlands for waterfowl. So when you're in an area like the Old Mine River, we're getting overbank flooding every year now. And so what happens, what that means is, you know, you're getting floods that come over that bank, and we're getting longer duration floods and more frequently. And so when you try to grow something in an area that overbank floods every year, and you're starting to get them in July and August, it's pretty tough to get those crops to grow. Emily's giving me the thumbs up. I'm going to be quiet. The video's a lot better than me. All right, roll with it.
It's to provide all the resources that those birds need throughout the wintering period. But you got to provide all the parts of the puzzle for him to stay all winter long.
Let's go back to the late 80s and early 2000s. We had just a few waterfowl managers that really understood wetlands management. And so really there was 3 or 4 people that were doing this. And then over time, there's been a group that's gone and got a lot more training on how we manage. And so one of the things that's new that we're doing since 2000 is managing our wildlife management areas and complexes. Just think about the Mississippi River Alluvia Valley and the Tennessee Valley. So we have a population of ducks that come down the Mississippi Valley. We have a population that comes down the Tennessee Valley. And so we've got multiple areas across those different river systems. And so early on, what we had was we had them pretty scattered. Luckily, we had a director, Gary Myers, that was there that really wanted to get into the land purchasing business to be able to provide for future generations. So he started putting these areas together and started doing connectivity from different WMA, a different refuge system across there. So what that does now is provide more hunting opportunity. So we're managing these as complexes. And the reason we're doing this is to provide all the nutritional things that a duck needs throughout the season while they're here. It's our responsibility as hunters, it's our responsibility as agency personnel to help send these ducks back fat and in good body condition. We want to be able to send these ducks back to the nesting grounds to be able to lay a good hard egg and to be able to produce so that we get to hunt them next year and so that future generations continue to hunt them. Not only the state and federal partners do the same thing as far as waterfowl management, you've got many people in the private sector these days doing it.
Every morning during duck season, I have to get up and I have to face the crowd. That means I got to take our guests out with our guides, come back successful, and that innately pushes you every day to try to make the land better, to be more successful for these folks that are coming in, and those monies are gleaned to put it back into the resource. I mean, when you run a duck club for a 60-day season, and in 25, it'll be 20 years of every day, the grind, watching those birds, how they utilize the different habitats. Well, you know, if we know these ducks need these resources, we can go to a book and read that. But watch them on weather events and watch them when they eat the hot foods and when they go to the moist soil. And I'll tell you, when it really, the blight bulb come on in November of 2006-07 duck season, had 40 acres of corn planted back here, some really good corn. George spent a lot of money on it. That was the most mild winter we've seen since some of the 80s. That was the poorest mallard harvest year we ever had on Five Oaks. But I say that to say, I said, look, you putting all your eggs in one basket. If you're going to grow all one crop on a duck club, you're going to fail. And so then we go flip 90 degrees and start going more moist soil, you know, more native weeds. It's because the ducks need that. You know, people say, they hire me, they say, where do I need to put my duck line? And I said, well, let's let the ducks tell us and then we'll put it there. Does that make sense? So if you're watching those birds day in and day out, and especially when we have older cohorts of birds, when we don't have a good hatch, put all corn out there and see what happens to you. They're going to beat you because they're smart. But so instead of seeing huge numbers of ducks on one field for a short window, I'm trying to keep ducks here from Halloween until they go home in March.
I'm a veterinarian. I live in Missouri. I'm the founder of Momarsh. So when you think about products like Invisalab, Invisman, the Final Stand, you know, those are all products that I developed back in the day. I'm also one of the original founders of Habitat Flats. It's an outfitting operation. We have a couple lodges in Missouri. We have a lodge up in Canada. We had a lodge in Kansas. We've hunted around quite a bit. Tony is one of my partners there. He's our manager. And so we do a lot of planning, and he does a lot of work on trying to make sure that we're providing a good variety of proteins, carbs, whether it's in the way of invertebrates or seeds or shelter for the ducks. In my opinion, there's three things that a duck really needs. He needs water, he needs food, and he needs shelter. In our opinion, the best way to do that is by offering them a variety of different things which will benefit them. So early, we want them to have, you know, invertebrates, shallow water. We use mowing as a technique to help to get that invertebrate bloom. We're doing that in our moist soil tracks.
Corn's not a bad thing. A hot crop's a good thing. It's just when the temperature changes. I'll give a good example. So I had somebody inquire with me back last year that said, hey, I want to know why Tennessee National, one of our great partners, is not knocking down more corn. They do this on the federal refuge over there. Not our refuge, but U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's refuge. And so I said, you know what? They don't have to knock. The truck can ride over there right now and take a look and see what's happening. Let's see where the ducks are today. Literally had at least 100 or more corn knocked down on the ground, had low water in it or shallow water where the ducks could get to the corn and feed. We did not see a duck in the corn that day. We were in 40s, 50s. I don't remember the exact temperature, but when we rode around, there was a lot of ducks on the refuge, but they were all in the moist soil areas. There's no need to plant more corn. There's no need to knock more corn down. If the ducks aren't using it, then there's no need to be able to put more on the ground or have them in that type habitat. And so as these temperatures are no longer 25 degrees or colder for a lot of days during the season, it's more important now than ever that we provide this diversity. We have these areas of moist soil production, and we have aquatic invertebrates that are available for them.
One thing that we think about is when they get here, they've traveled, some of them over 1,000 miles in one flight without stopping. And when they get here, what we need to do for them is provide them the protein and essential nutrients and all the things that they need to refuel from that migration so that they prepare themselves for the cold, harsh winter if we're going to have one.
That after hunting season use may be the most important time for these WMAs. You've got overlapping life history things going on. The birds are paired up. They're going through a body feather molt, and they're also getting their energy to make that northern migration again. That time period is when they need more soil plants and invertebrates more than ever.
Corn is a hot crop. It is a strictly hydrate. It's no different than if a human chose to live their life off of it. It's just not enough to survive.
Every single duck needs every different day. And the good Lord it put it in their DNA to know what to search for to be successfully healthy and to pair and then to breed and have more. And that means they need shrub. They need hot foods like your rice, corn, milo, millet, small grains. They need forested wetlands like our green tree reservoirs and our native river bottom. Listen, all of those things are good. And one of those things in everything that you got on the farm is bad.
Ducks love corn for a couple reasons. One, it's a high carb, big ticket item when it comes, when things get tough and it's cold, they'll eat it if they can get to it. And then it's also really good roosting cover. So they love to be in corn at night. They're safe. It's warm relatively. That plant helps to insulate the water some, and they have good protection from above. Corn has its place and time, but corn also, if you want to make your ducks nocturnal, plant a bunch of corn and you'll see those patterns change. The more flooded corn you have and the more utilization of that and access to that they have, the more they're not going to do other things. The less they're going to use your hunting areas during the day, the less they're going to dry field. But having said that, there is value to corn, and we do manage some places and some stuff for corn.
People ask a question, why not wall-to-wall corn? One of the things that you've probably seen in places that we plant corn is once the corn's gone, the ducks are gone. If we go in and we plant wall-to-wall corn, ducks start coming into those areas after 3 o'clock in the evenings, and they're feeding hard on that corn. 50,000 ducks can wipe out a lot of corn overnight. And then what happens? They quit coming back to that area altogether. Moist soil production is much different. There's several different things that ducks use in a moist soil management unit. They're going to eat the seeds that are provided there. They're going to eat a lot of aquatic invertebrates, but these provide a lot of nutritional value to the duck. We can send the duck back in better body condition. And the good thing is they keep coming back to these units all throughout the season.
All sorts of new technologies that are becoming available to help us learn more details about some of the things that we've studied sort of in captive situations and so forth. But now we can study it out in the wild. Metabarcoding, taking fecal samples and running that through some genetic analysis to identify what these birds are eating on your property. Talk about some of that. Y'all are starting to do that here with some of your researchers, some of your director of the 50 Research Center. And what are y'all learning?
A lot. So, if a duck eat it and he likes it and it's very frequent in his diet, don't you think you ought to manage for it?
I think so.
Okay, well, we didn't get much corn because we don't raise a lot of corn. But of these samples that the guys take, Dr. Ashton's looking at this data, and, I'm learning after 30 years of managing ducks, we always knew they ate chufa, right?
Yep.
But they eat the yellow nutsedge seeds too, and they're at high frequency in their diet. So instead of me putting permit out in the edge of the rice field and killing it, we're growing it. And so, broadleaf signal grass, we knew they loved the smart weeds. I still don't know why, as hard as those seeds are. It may be something to do with the grit,
As a source of grit. Some speculation that's how they're using it.
But they love it. And whatever bugs are associated with, they definitely love that. We do a lot of different cultural practices, whether it be cleaning, fall mowing, fall disking. We want to focus on the next 5 years, maybe really studying more about those underwater critters and how we can do management practices to increase them, whether it be in the forest or whether it be in moist soil. But man, just to see that every duck, just about, the majority of the ducks that were shot. Healthy woods means healthy mallards, means dead mallards, okay, at 5 Oaks Duck Life.
And that's what turns the crank here. Make no mistake about that, right?
It is. I did over in Irby Woods in Mississippi one time. We looked at, we did about 5 years where me and Rob Stockett would go in and say, we had a good crop of acorns, a bad crop of acorns, or a jam up acorns. Well, if you look at duck harvest against those, the poor years was poor kill on mallards, the highest of the yield of the acorns, the highest the yield of the harvest. So I'm like, let's feed the trees, let's do thinning, let's do whatever we can to promote better habitat conditions in the forest. Just like in a ag field, we're going to do everything we can to make more acorns and more habitat available for the ducks at the right depth at the right time. You know, it all lines up. And I wish we could educate people in that, because it's not rocket science. It's do what the duck wants to do instead of what the hunter wants to do.
Really, one of the things that we have been tasked with is farming in areas where we really shouldn't be farming. So, and here's what I mean by that. We're actually farming in the annual floodplain. One interesting thing about Kentucky Lake is, if you think about where we're farming, we're actually below the level of the lake. So think about that, trying to put a crop below the level of the lake, because that's what we're doing. So really, we probably shouldn't be farming in that area, but hey, we own what we own, so we're trying to make the best use of that. Now move over to the Obion River system. Again, what we're doing, we're farming in the annual floodplain. So what does that mean? That means that area overbank floods every year annually. And what's happening that's a big factor to our management is, and why we're shifting more to moist soils, is they can tolerate water for longer periods of time. And so what we're seeing, and we are seeing over time and have seen over time, is we're getting longer floods. So the duration of the flood lasts longer, the flood frequency is more often. And so just this year alone, you all probably know we received several big rains in July, several big rains in August. Well, you might say, well, hey, these rains aren't normal. We had as much as 14 inches around the Union City area. Well, what we've seen is historically we can look at data over time, and yes, they are becoming more frequent. So what happens when you're farming at a very low elevation and you get a rain event many times now that's 2 inches or greater? We'll lose a big portion of the crops that we plant. Now, our moist soil plants can survive that better. So what we're doing, we're getting in the lowest elevations and planting moist soils, and we're trying to get up to higher elevations and plant things like hot crops such as corn. So recently this year, I've been asked, people will go down a road and they'll say, well, on that side of the road where the WMA is, your crops look terrible. On this side of the road, the crops look great. Well, that is maybe as much as 5, even 10 feet in elevation change. And so as you think about these rivers overbank flooding, and you think about the Kentucky Lake units, you think about the river elevations, think about when that water gets in there and where that water starts to rise. And so we're trying to mill it, whether that be corn.
You know, I have grown up in this area, started duck hunting West Sandy in around the early 90s, 92, 93 as a young child. And a lot of the issues we have now with flooding aren't necessarily driven by climate or the amount of rain we're getting. A lot of these WMAs, they're silting in like every other wetland in the southeast. We have sediment loads that are pouring down into our river systems, and they're carrying a lot of sand, a lot of silt, and what that does is it just fills it in. So, you know, we have an elevation X in 1995. Well, that elevation may be up here in 2023. And so when we get the same amount of rainfall, it acts differently on the landscape. And that's why we're seeing a lot more prone to flooding.
We're trying to put resources on the ground for you all as hunters. The agency, just in planting crops and pumping alone, is spending over $1 million on waterfowl management. Doesn't include staff time or a lot of the other resources. That's just $1 million. And you say, well, you know, we started asking ourselves, how does that compare to other states? Well, most of the states in the southeast, most of the states that touch Tennessee are not planting anything, or they're planting very little corn. And you may say, well, why is that the case? Well, what we found is over time, things have changed. And so a lot of private clubs are planting corn. And so a lot of these agencies are going to more moist soil management. That way they're getting that diversity that we're talking about.
People say, I want this field to be corn this year. Well, it stands in water till about June. It has poor drainage. They plant it, it drowns out. They plant it, it drowns out. Well, do you think that's a good place to plant corn?
Probably not.
Okay. So the other guy says, I want this to be moist soil, and it's a clayey, but it's a very droughty, clayey soil. It doesn't hold water very well, and it doesn't grow any weeds. Do you think that's a good place to plant soil? Probably not. My point is that you, in the way the rotation works is we identify by June 1 if that's a good moist soil plot in the field or a bad one. Or if we know we have invasive plants from the previous year, we're going to use corn, rice, milo, whatever the chemistry to clean it up to get rid of the invasive plant. So ag plays an incredibly major part of managing the holistic rest areas or the holistic property. I tell people every day that I'm consulting, if you do the same thing every year, you will fail. So what does that mean? That means if I grow corn in my duck pond, my yields are going down. Okay, why do you think we have crop rotations in agronomy and in agriculture? Because the soil won't take that.
Another problem with the corn crop, when it floods out, it puts managers in a bind. We have to treat that field differently because of the time of year that it may flood out. Replant corn is usually not an option either from the economic standpoint or a timing. We fall back on planting millet a lot. What we've seen more than anything here lately is armyworm damage. The time that planted millet crop is coming off is when we're getting invaded by armyworms. And that planted millet is just not as hardy as the moist soil. One, it's younger, it's tender. That's what the armyworms are looking for. And we see very little damage, armyworm damage in moist soil here.
Yeah, and I like to tell hunters a lot of time when we get this conversation is, I can guarantee you a crop by doing nothing. Maybe a little bit of fertilizer, maybe a little bit of herbicide if needed. I can guarantee you a crop at those low elevations. Or we can roll the dice. We can go plant the corn. And we know that in some areas, 9 out of 10 years, we're losing that corn crop. And then you have nothing. If it's at the right time, you end up with nothing.
Corn is a tool that we utilize, but it's got to be levee protected or else you run a big risk of a flood. And it all, we had a bunch of that. We were in a drought this year. We had a big flood in August, and we lost on just our personal tracks. We lost. So if I could have a do-over, because, when you get into all running short on days here, and if your corn dies and you don't have enough time for things to start growing again and head out, then you end up with basically nothing there. I'm a big proponent of moist soil. I personally really like smartweed because it lasts a long time. Those ducks, when it gets late in the year and they've gotten all the easy stuff, as you continue to bring those water levels up, they'll start running through that smartweed even when it doesn't really have hardly any water on it, because they figure out that they can run through there and flap their wings and stuff, and the seeds fall off the plant that are still on the plant. And then they can go out there and eat those seeds that have been, been protected because they've been on the plant and they haven't been able to eat. So it lasts a long time. It also gives them some good, vertical cover to hide from predators and stay out of the sun some.
One of the things that we get from a lot of our hunters is, I've hunted this area all my life. Why aren't you doing what you used to do? Well, our managers are actually farming these areas 365 days a year. So duck hunting is not just 60 days for our managers. They're out there on the landscape all year long. And we do more work in the off season than we do in the in season. What I mean is, throughout the whole year, we're tearing out beaver dams. We're trying to get water moving, water flowing. We're trying to hold water. We're trying to manipulate water levels. We're doing slow drawdowns to try to promote these moist soils. So what we get to see in the process of doing that is really how this landscape changes. So you know what? Even our managers that have only been on the ground maybe 5-10 years compared to somebody that's lived in an area, hunted there for 30 years, they really get to see what's changing. A lot of these areas are silting in, and they have over time because of the way the river systems are. And that really changes how you can get water off and how you can get water on these areas. And that in turn affects what we can grow there.
And when you
manage for a diversity of wetland types across this landscape, you're not only managing for mallards, right? You're making you're creating
complex.
a wetland complex that supports what? Diversity of species?
Diversity of species, although we're mallard hunters, but we provide for all species, especially on Benson Lake here behind the light. It's 4 green tree reservoirs and kind of a 5th one. But all the open land, all the resources for rest. Although that's another major component of how I work on these properties is that if you're not willing to rest, unless you're right next door to a refuge, if you're not willing to give the ducks a break in these days, you fail.
We establish our own refuge areas as well, because having places where they're undisturbed, if you can create flight lines there where they're going from one safe spot to another safe spot, and you got food here and there and traffic areas, it's just a way that you can keep those ducks fresher and have success for a longer period of time. But also, it's not all just about the hunting success, how many days you kill how many ducks. It's also, about conservation.
Also with these WMAs, they're wildlife management areas. It's not just about waterfowl to us. We manage all wildlife species. That could be managing these WMAs for providing nesting cover and brood rearing cover for wild turkeys, cover for white-tailed deer, fawn rearing, small game species, quail. I mean, just the whole plethora of both game and non-game species. And in doing that, we can't create just a monoculture. If we choose to make a monoculture of one thing over the other, we're not doing our due diligence as wildlife managers in managing for wildlife.
Glad we worked through that technical difficulty. Thank you, Emily and team, for fixing that. And thank you for the folks that helped with the production of that. So, Mr. Chairman, really, again, all we were trying to do with that is just show why we're doing some of the things we're doing. Hunters don't perceive that we're stopping planting corn. I mean, after watching that, people may say, well, are they going to quit planting corn? The answer is no, we're not going to quit planting corn. But hopefully that it helps explain. We've been doing this a lot on far west Tennessee over to the Mississippi River areas. We've made a little bit of a shift on the Kentucky Lake units. We have reduced some of the number of acres of corn that we're planting, and hopefully that explains why. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. I'd be glad to entertain any questions or anything that you may want at this time.
Any questions from any commissioners? Anyone in the public? Thank you, Director. That was very good. Okay, commissioners, any other business from anyone? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Adjourned.